Do do do, theme song. Do do do, I'm broke, so this is my theme song. Do do do, just imagine this is an awesome theme song. Do do, theme song. Left of the box. Hello, welcome to Left of the Box. Bonjour, bienvenue. I'm Sandy. Well, as the title says, I'll be joined by Dan from the internet in just a little bit. He's running a little bit behind. So instead, you get an Abernappy. Here, he can, oh, right, he'll see the necklace and want to eat it. Here we go. There we go. He's curled up on my lap right now. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. So far in the sandbox, we have Mindy Doctor, Soul Life, John Ross, Good for Gabby, Looney Tunes 9000. I think that's everyone right now. Welcome. Oh, Bad Lefty is also there. Wonderful. Abernappy. I have to be careful. He's the cord chewer. Speaking of cords, I did find my cord for my mouse. For people who were watching my last live stream, I was kind of freaking out because I had lost the mouse cord because I have a wireless mouse here. But it lost its charge and it needs a wire in order to get plugged into the computer, and I couldn't find it and it was driving me crazy. Well, that cord fits a wireless light that I have, and I had that in the other room and stuff. So anyway, I found it. My mouse is charged. And if it runs out of charge, I have a cord long enough to not make it too awkward. Yeah. So, to get started, I'll just bring this up. So, I've been having to take Frodo back to the vet, but it's the not-for-profit vet. So, at first I wasn't going to ask for any help, but I've had to take him back a few times and it's starting to add up. Basically, at this point, we're just keeping him comfortable. He doesn't have much time left. His kidney disease is quite bad, and when I took him into the vet yesterday, and the vet could feel a growth on his abdomen. So, yeah, he probably doesn't have that much longer. So I'm just trying to keep him comfortable. He's on medication to help with the nausea. He has to have special kidney food. So any help with that would be greatly appreciated. Links are in the description box below. You can donate through PayPal, or if you're Canadian, you can send an e-transfer to SandeeLovas@gmail.com. I'm just trying to prepare myself for it. I love that cat to pieces. He's been with me for 16 years. He is my light. He's my anchor. So I'm prepping my brain for it right now. I don't want to. I want him forever, but you know. Unfortunately, cat lives are so short. They have 9 of them, but they're very short. Abernappy is still sitting here curled up on my lap. So, let's see. Oh, Donald James also jumped into the Sandbox. So, thank you everyone for checking out my channel. My last video is doing quite well. It's a clip from one of my longer videos just talking about Ben Glebe and TYT. And yeah, personally, I wasn't thrilled with that clip because there's a lot that I've said about it that wasn't in that clip. I've said it at different times in different live streams because it's very important to note. And one of the things that's like my biggest pet peeve about TYT's both siding what's happening in Gaza is there's no two sides to genocide. There's just, it's genocide. You don't get to argue that it's not at this point. But also, it's solely irresponsible to platform that on a leftist news show. Because, like, Cenk would never platform somebody regularly who is a climate change denier. someone who is an anti-vaxxer. Like he doesn't platform them all the time to give the both sides of the arguments, because again, with those issues there aren't two sides. There's the truth backed up by fact and science and all that sort of stuff, and then there's just the not truth, the lies, and what people wish were real and all that sort of stuff. And it's incumbent upon us as leftists to really push back against any sort of false information. Emma did a really good job of it today on the Majority Report. I haven't caught all of the show yet, but I did catch the part where she was really starting to push back on the idea that as a leftist, we can't sit idly by if we have a platform, and we have to call it for what it is, and it is a genocide. So for Ben Glebe to continuously get the platform of the world's largest online progressive network to claim that what Israel is doing, what the IOF is doing, isn't a genocide, again, it's just so irresponsible of that network. We'll be touching on a story about that as well. As always, I'll start off with stuff from Gaza, and we'll take it from there. I'm just, again, waiting for Dan to show up. I don't know if I should get started with the news before then, because there's a lot to cover, but it should be fun. I like having guests on. It's more complicated for my setup, and it takes a little more conscious thought on what I'm clicking when I'm clicking. But, it's nice to have that conversation with somebody here. So, let's see if there's anything here. Yes, good for Gabby. The cat meows that you're hearing is from the late Tulip. She was a cat that passed away in the spring, and she was a darling, sweet cat. I had her for about 2.5 years from a rescue, and she had just the loudest, quirkiest meow. And my end, where I end the show, has a whole bunch of cat meows. It drives other
ding
cats
dong, ding
bonkers.
Dong, ding dong.
I didn't silence my phone. Just a second. Just Dan telling me he's about 3 minutes away. That's fine. Yeah, so Tulip was an absolute doll. Her cries, her cat meows, just drives other cats wild. When I used to play that for Abernathy before he got used to them, he would like try to dig into the speaker trying to find where those noises are coming from. But yeah, really sweet cat. And yeah, Frodo, it's bizarre because if it wasn't for his actual diagnosis and the fact that he's trying to get him to eat and drink is such a pain, he's fine. He plays with both of his brothers now, even Abernathy. And Abernathy, I thought he was going to have a trouble with because Abernathy's really big. This cat here is not even a year old yet. He's a Bengal mix. And I thought when Frodo would start playing with him that Frodo would get his ass kicked because he's a 16-year-old cat, but no, he takes Abernathy to task. And he was playing with Lanier before that, but Lanier is quite small. Frodo can still jump about 3 feet in the air. He jumps to the back of the chair that I sit on in my living area, which is why I know he can still jump that high, which is just incredible. We still have snuggles. He's still very compassionate and all that sort of stuff. And having him at the vet yesterday was just, he doesn't like strangers at all. He's very, very shy. And so the vet had come in and they left. And then he kind of crawled up onto me and just clung onto me and buried his head into my chest and stuff. And I was just like, oh my God, it's like your heart breaks, but at the same time, it's like I just want to hold him forever like that, you know? So yeah, I have to take him in every now and then to get subdermal fluids. Hopefully the medication keeps on working to keep his appetite going. But yeah, it's just a matter of time, unfortunately. Oh, thank you for the super chat from Good for Gabby. Much appreciation for the good ones like Sandy that don't go silent with regards to Gaza. Uh, I think there's some emojis there that I can't, that aren't showing up, like Pac-Man. Yes, from what I hear, I don't watch Dave Pac-Man, but from what I've heard and the couple of clips that I've seen floating around online, yeah, not very good. Um, like I said, I didn't catch all of Majority Report yet today, and Emma was talking about it. And from the sounds of it, Pac-Man has just gone quiet on it, which is probably just a little bit step better than what Ben Glebe is doing. But as leftists with our platforms, we can't stay silent in the face of what's going on there. Considering how complicit our countries are with it and how much we're actually funding the IOF and stuff, it's disgusting. But we will get into that bit in a little bit. MIDI doctors. It was a weird call. Yeah, I tuned in halfway through that call and I was like, okay, yeah, on the Majority Report. I was like, yeah, I'm looking forward to watching this in its full context. But you know, I like watching combative calls. It's popcorn for me, I guess. Um, Sam does such a good job of it, and so does Emma, and just it's a good lesson on how not to take BS from people. Because at some point, I wouldn't mind trying to do like the whole call in thing, but it's a matter of getting comfortable with it. Like calling into the Majority Report, I have a hard time with the anxiety and stuff, but it's a bit of a different vibe when people are calling in to me, I think. So, oh, yeah, my leg is falling asleep. Nappy is still there. Oh, okay, gotta adjust you, cat. Uh, there we go. Let's see. Was there anything else I wanted to touch on? Oh, I think Dan from the internet is getting ready to pop in. Okay, he gave me the thumbs up, so I will be right back with Dan from the internet. There we are. We're live. Dan from
Hello.
the internet, welcome.
Hi. Good to see you, Sandy. Good to see you, audience. I am tanned, rested, and ready in that I just came back from I we don't need to get into too many details, but I did my day job today,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm gonna do that a little bit afterwards once I'm offline right now. But I also did a little run. I did a little bit of exercise, did a little bit of grocery shopping, and I've tried to show up for all of my friends today. And Sandy, you are no different. And so I'm very sorry for my delay. This is my fault for trying to do everything everywhere all at once, but I'm very happy that you have me on,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm super super interested in the topics that you sent over for me.
Yeah.
So yes, howdy y'all, howdy Sandy.
Well,
Good to see you.
here to make you feel a little bit better.
Hmm. No, I'm actually, all things
Yeah.
considered, I'm doing relatively good. I'm just very
Oh no.
packing my schedule tightly is what it means. But
Yeah.
I love a cat. I love to see a cat.
Yeah. He.
Cats are my favorite, and I can't wait to have my own.
Yeah. I have to kick him
How's he
off my
doing?
lap. He's a bundle of joy. That one. He's very energetic still, very big. Um, I was just mentioning about Frodo, my other cat. He's old. He's not doing well. Um,
Yes.
the vet felt a growth on his abdomen when I took him in yesterday. So it's just at this point we're keeping him comfortable. And then after that, I can focus a little bit more on Abernathy because, like, there's nothing wrong with him. He's just fat. And and
I
part of
mean,
yeah, that's
go
partly
ahead.
because Frodo doesn't eat properly. He's not eating enough. So he's super skinny. So I would always try to leave food out for them. But then Abernathy would just chomp into it. So
I mean, that's a very diplomatic way of saying,
yeah.
because I've had this similar cat dynamic before. One cat leaves leftovers, other cat helps themselves.
Mhm. Well, that's why I still have to sleep with just Frodo in the bedroom because I keep the door closed so that he's always been a grazer when it comes to food, like forever. So at least at night, I keep him in the bedroom, and that gives him time to just graze away at his food. But
Mhm.
as soon as I open up the door in the morning, it's a stampede with Lanier and Abernathy coming in for the leftovers. Because Lanier is an absolute monster when it comes to wet food. Like hungry, hungry hippo. Like you just see him going to town on any wet food that's there.
Do you have your cats on a sorry,
Uh,
sorry, I have a cat question, and we can say it for now or later, but I want you to host your show.
Oh, I'm good talking about cats.
Okay, really fast.
It's the cat hour.
Do you keep your cats, like all of your cats, do you keep them on the same sort of diet to where it's like wet food breakfast, dry food lunch, or like however you do it, like wet food dinner, dry food brunch, how do you set up how do you spoil your cats is kind of my question here.
Uh, well, right now I give them some wet food at in the morning or yeah, at night because I have to. Because like I said, I feed Frodo separately. And if I try to give him wet food and take that into the bedroom without putting a diversion down for Lanier, Lanier will chew the door down. Um, and then I put kibble in their dishes. I used to do it first thing in the morning because it was empty. But like I said, I need to stop giving them so much kibble throughout the day. And yeah.
It's hard though,
Hmm.
it's hard to tell those faces no. I totally I've seen that. I've
Hmm.
been there.
Well, Lanier, like I said, he like will pig out on the wet food and won't even let Abernathy have any. And yet his body size is fine. So I don't know, because Abernathy is also very energetic too. So I don't know. I have to be. Part of me is tempted to let him out in the hall of the apartment building to like run up and down the hall. But I don't want him to get in the habit of running out the door because he already does that to some extent. He's a very curious cat. He loves meeting people. And so sometimes as I'm coming in the door, he'll like run out into the hall to see if anybody is there to say hi. Um, which is fine in this building, but I don't know where I'm going to be living for the rest of my life and if that's going to be an option. Plus, the neighbor has some really large dogs that
Yeah,
at any
there's
given
definitely a
time could be
lot
there.
that like you have to deal with in the
Hmm.
dynamics there. But I mean, like, I'm glad most of all the cats are catting.
Hmm.
And yeah, that's really good. I
Yeah.
can't wait to have kittens of my own. But yeah, I imagine this may be for folks who are dog fans who
Yeah.
haven't been enlightened enough to know that you can be both a dog and cat lover, and even when you are more enlightened, a cat lover exclusively. But I'm not here
Mhm.
for that
Yeah,
fight.
yeah.
I'm here for other fights, or honestly, other conversations. I don't think you and I will disagree that much, but I will
Mhm.
fight with other factors that are very crucial to our existence today
Mhm.
that I've felt in a number of different places.
Yeah,
It's helped me to be grounded in. So yeah,
yeah.
I'm down to talk about any of the
Yeah.
other stuff you have planned. Again, I'm
Okay.
sorry as a producer, I don't
Yeah.
want to derail your show.
Oh,
Have at it.
that's okay. With ADHD, I'm all over the place all the time. So it's like, okay, so as usual with my live streams though, I do start off with news about Gaza, but I always try to stay away from the harshest, worst stuff. So we'll talk about because there's so many different angles to Gaza to get to with everything that's happening over there. So it's important to cover a wide range, but I don't want to show any of the horrific video or anything of that sort. So we'll get to that in just one moment. And again, since I'm in this setup, everyone, every time I switch the screen layout, I have to cut away. So just a moment.
No flipping. No
Yeah, when I switch away, they. Oh, no, wrong. There, I did the transition a little bit better this time. Hello, everyone, with the proper layout. So, here's a lesson that everyone needs to be aware of when it comes to what you find online is I saw this and I thought it was too outrageous to be real because Yuck Yucks is a comedy, stand-up comedy club. I don't know if they're a chain that's like in the States or not, but there's one in Toronto. And I saw this floating around saying Yuck Yucks is hosting a show raising money for Friends of the Defense Force. Israeli Defense Force. Show them that supporters of genocide of Palestinians are not welcome in the city. So to me, this
Sorry, what? Sorry, repeat their point again, please.
yeah, see, this to me just made no sense at all. So I'm like, this can't be real because they're like, show them that supporters of the genocide of Palestinians are not welcome in this city, but that would be the Israeli Defense Force that's the perpetrators of that. So they're doing this to raise money for the people that
They're
aren't
raising
welcome.
money for Friends of the IDF
Uh-huh.
who are supporters of the Palestinian genocide,
Yes.
who this group says that people like that are not welcome in their city.
Yeah.
That's a lot. I mean, okay, so like I want to respect that sometimes there's a difference.
Mhm.
People are coming at politics in different ways, and so I don't want to condescend. Also, people who are very smart and people who are aware and understand what's going on can get whiplash by how ridiculous this gets sometimes.
Mhm.
And this is one of those moments for me where I was like, huh, 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 huh. I don't know how to like, when you're bouncing a little piece in Connect 4, like
Mhm.
how this lands.
Mhm.
That was a lot. Thank you for walking me through it. What?
Yeah,
So
well,
this is Art House Toronto,
yeah.
and from what I looked at, Yuck Yucks is a little bit of like a larger thing.
Yeah, it is
And
it's a
I see
big
a
club.
Yuck Yucks Burlington. Is there a Burlington in Canada? Sorry.
Yes, there's a Burlington in Canada,
Okay, because I
right
was
close
thinking
to Toronto.
Burlington,
Mhm.
Okay, because I was thinking
Mhm.
Burlington, Vermont,
Yeah.
right? And that's in the United
Mhm.
States, but close enough to Canada that
Mhm.
maybe they have an affiliation.
Yeah.
Is there a purely Burlington, Canada?
Yes, there's a Burlington, Canada, close to
Okay.
Toronto. But
That's incredibly
yeah.
confusing.
Yeah.
You are forced by
Well,
Lockheed Martin to rename it.
when people in some of the states refer to Ontario as a city because there's a city in their state called Ontario, that throws me off. But what I wanted to get at with this is that when you see
Well,
stuff like this,
in
mhm,
California, we have Ontario Airport, which is the Lord's
mhm,
airport,
yeah.
because you can take that to avoid Los Angeles. But
Well,
I guess there's an Ontario in Toronto. I'm sure you copied that. I'm kidding. I'm being sarcastic.
right near where I live, there's a Cambridge, there's a Paris, there's a London, there's a Fergus.
Colonization for 400, please.
Yes.
Again, Sandy, go ahead.
Yeah. So, like I was saying, when I see stuff like this that seems just too inconsistent, incongruent, seems too blatant, I ask myself, is this real? Is this Israel? Is this real? And because I want to, I like to double check my facts. And so when you see something like this, it's important to always then go to the website. So I did. And yeah, it kind of is real. Is real. It is a thing.
Which reel?
It is a thing. The poster is different, but it says stand up for Israel. So it is real. Um In light of the October 7th tragedy in Israel, it's more important than ever to unite in support of Israel to ensure the safety and security of the Jewish people once and for all. Stand Up,
Mm.
New York and Badass Jews is proud to announce a 27-city tour of the US Canada feature comedians that stand with Israel. The
27.
tour will benefit friends of the defense of the
Okay,
Israel Defense
I'm
Forces.
I'm I'm so sorry to hijack the show, but there's two things I'm coming out from this. One, 27 city tour, more on that later. I'm gonna need you to like go back on the screen a little bit to the original thing that we read. Because again, I've had a long day, but I feel like I'm getting whiplash. Like, what was the first version of the poster that we saw? Because what you're showing right now is a very explicitly from like top to bottom, this is something that benefits Israel. But when you see the original posters,
Yeah.
it says, and I quote, show them that supporters of the genocide of Palestinians are not welcome in the city, which is diametrically opposed to what you see if you go on to the next
Mhm.
page. I'm not going to ask you to flip again, Sandy. So like that's it.
No, I'll
Like
flip back
it's
so that people,
diametrically,
yeah, can see it. But
yeah,
like,
like it's diametrically opposed to what you see on the other page, which is like we're friends of the Israeli Defense Forces.
mhm.
Let's make sure that the IDF gets to do whatever they want to do.
Yeah,
Whereas on the
like,
first page is like we're friends of the IDF, free Palestine. Like those are
yeah,
diametrically opposed things. And it like the last thing I'll say before you continue here, and like maybe we'll revisit this, is that you have to be very careful with how these things are messaged because one thing I'm really kind of like trying to harness and make sense for a power report or a Dan from the internet or a detour context at youtube.com/Dan from the internet is like how do I ground people who have been radicalized by what's been going on in Palestine since October 7th with what's been going on in Palestine since 1947, right?
yeah.
Like I need to make that connection. I think a lot of leftists who are content creators at a lot of levels are currently failing to make that connection, myself included. But
Mhm.
like this is one of those special cases where thank you Sandy for laying out this audience. You're with a real one for being with Sandy right now because like Sandy's laying out this difference.
Mhm.
You
Yeah,
can see the difference between this poster and the event it leads to and the messaging and how very clear different it is. And you need to be that aware when you're reading, random
mhm.
events or, news in general. That's the eye you need.
Yeah.
Sandy, go ahead. Sorry.
So on this Instagram post here, like the description says, like Yuck Yucks Toronto is hosting a show raising money for Friends of Israeli Defense Forces, the only organization authorized across the United States to collect donations on behalf of soldiers of the Israeli occupation forces. So even there, it's like, okay, so they
The
have,
description.
yeah, they have the Israeli Defense Forces followed by, oh, but we're doing this on behalf of the Israeli occupation forces. Let's show them that supporters of the genocide of Palestinians are not welcome in the city. So I'm like, did AI write this? Because this doesn't seem real. And this is why I'm like, this can't be real. For the safety of yourself and the community, please wear a mask.
I really don't like say so. I was willing to believe that maybe AI wasn't responsible for this beforehand, but this seems like right, like telling a version of Chat GPT, like an early
Mm-hmm.
version of Chat GPT, or maybe the current version, because like none of the shit is really
Mm-hmm.
reliable for like real things that matter to people that they might be asking questions this thing for.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like, okay, um, someone asking and prompting this algorithm to spit out information that sounds like what a person would understand if you are trying to tell pro Israel talking points
Mm-hmm.
to a blue haired, stereotypical pro Palestinian straw man person of a liberal that these conservatives and Zionists really think that exists.
Yeah.
It's insulting. And
Well,
yeah, like it actually does feel like AI because it is that insulting,
yeah,
but
like,
it's insulting both in the fact like where AI is and both of like whoever prompted it to say that stuff.
yeah, like it's just. reading this description here, so we got that, and then this coming Wednesday evening, which is tonight, join us in front of Yuck Yucks with your flags. Oh, okay. I think maybe I'm starting to understand what this is. Maybe this poster. Okay, okay. I think this poster is to prompt a protest about the show Yuck Yucks is doing. Because it says like this Wednesday evening, join us in front of Yuck Yucks with your flags. I'm never sure how to say that word. KFS sign and banner to send the message that genocide is no joke. And then they're concerned about that. So I think, yeah, this is to protest this show.
To the best of my understanding, by the way, the pronunciation is kafia.
Kafia? Yeah.
Kafia. I think that's close-ish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that poster is
Please
about,
correct us in
yeah.
chat.
Yeah, because a lot of people were looking at that poster, especially on Twitter, and I think there was a lot of like misinterpretation of what that poster was standing for. But I think it's actually to rally people for a protest of this show now that I'm reading more into it. So then a lot more of that language makes a lot more sense.
I
But
think so. Again, I wouldn't. So on the actual page for Yuck Yucks Comedy Club, to make sure this is clear for
mhm,
folks, on the actual page for Yuck Yucks
this
Comedy
is
Club,
it.
regardless of what was said on social media, which is
Mhm,
what we're seeing on the screen here, it says that, Stand Up NY and Badass Jews is proud to present a 27 city tour, which is what I said, more on that later, of the US and Canada, featuring comedians that stand with Israel. The tour will benefit friends of the Israeli Defense Forces. So
mhm,
again, once you say that you are friends of the Israel Defense Forces, but you also say that you stand up against, the quote unquote genocide of Palestinians, there's one of two things that are happening. Either A, you're on some like deep level sarcasm that doesn't even fully make sense outside of the Chapo audience. And so I would feel very careful about expressing that, lest it be
mhm,
misconstrued by some much dumber people, of which many of those exist, as something that sounds more serious than what it
mhm,
is. Or version two, it is as serious as what it sounds like. And it's the
mhm,
worst version of what we're thinking about in version one, which is that you're trying to do a head fake on people because, again, the Israeli Defense Forces are a military force. There's a lot of different dynamics going on compared to like a political, a political arms and tendrils of a nation, and how that propaganda, how that strategy, you know, reaches from those tendrils. Because I think there's a very clear difference in that whoever's creating the politics of that is on a hierarchy above the military, because the
mhm,
military are the grunts, the military are the cannon fodder. And again, like, I understand that, it's always been a weird conversation because I have friends who have been very close to me who are progressives, who have like stood 10 toes on things like Black Lives Matter and making sure that there is no Muslim ban in the United States, and that, migrants from Central and South America have access and, fair access to the United States border, that Italian immigrants and Eastern European immigrants and, English and Irish and Spanish and Portuguese immigrants have gotten into countries like the United States and Canada, that those folks get the same opportunity, especially considering what the CIA has done in those places, right? So I have people who are, you know, Jewish culturally because that's where their family comes from, but I've known them as like relatively non-religious to the point of being atheists. And they hold all those progressive opinions. But once October 7th happened, and a little bit beforehand, they have been, are, and continue to be Zionists who unfortunately, stand in the way of a lot of progress domestically and internationally, as far as teeth goes to, for how people writ large in the world in a democratic fashion, regardless of whether they live in a democratic state or not individually, care about the Israel Palestine conflict. And so it's a very difficult thing in where you've seen so much propaganda, unfortunately. And so it means that people who, I'm not going to get in this like leftist, true leftist definition conversation, but if you're really about it when it comes to politics, I really need folks to not just trust individual sources, but to have the skill to be able to discern when individual sources might be effing with you. Because a lot of people will see this on Instagram and they'll read the "We stand against the genocide of Palestinians." And then a lot of people will actually click in and see this on the page and they'll buy tickets and they'll benefit, friends of the IDF,
Yeah.
whatever this is, right? Or, they'll read in and they'll actually see that, like, hey, wait a minute. There's
Yeah.
something that's confusing me here. And like that's I fear, unfortunately, that there isn't enough material analysis grounded in a lot of the folks who have been radicalized by this moment, rightfully radicalized for this moment, to be able to navigate the onslaught of misinformation. Some of my Jewish friends refer to as bad hasbara, with using the Hasidic term, or the Yiddish term for like propaganda. um People who are falling for this bad Hasbara, who don't have a analysis, a media, a literacy to be able to fight against this. And that's what I worry about. And that's the kind of thing that, like, on my show, or if I'm guesting on shows, is the thing I'm kind of laser focused on making sure
Mhm.
people start to have a lens for.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't imagine the type of jokes and stuff that would even be on this too. But it's a good reminder to people too that if you're going to do a protest, make sure that the poster is clear as to what you're doing, because I'm really thinking, okay, that other poster was about protesting this show.
And do your research, like,
Hmm.
make sure everyone on that list, or yeah, like, do your research on the people who might be showing up to a protest, and make sure, like,
Hmm.
okay, I found 2 or 3 people who have said some sus things about the rights of the Palestinians to exist.
Yeah.
Maybe this protest might not be for me. I mean, this is the world where we need to start flexing those muscles a little bit, much like we exercise in the gym, much like we can go to therapy to make sure our mental health is, like, on a level. We need to exercise our media literacy skills so that in times like this, where we are facing blatant propaganda, hasbara
Hmm.
as it's called in this particular specific fashion, rather, that we're able to better combat it and have the skills to combat it.
Yeah. Like I tried clicking on reading the full bio of this too, and you actually have to send in a request.
So
So
you have to send in a request to read the bio. What happens if you click to buy the tickets?
so this is what you see when
Huh.
or log
N-
in
n-
for additional talent photos, videos.
Things that make you go, hmm.
Yeah. If we go back to this, oops, it suddenly stopped sharing. There we go. There we go. Yeah, like I can't even make the poster larger and stuff because I have questions. Because it says the tour will benefit the Friends of Israel Defense Force. So to me, that's definitely like this is Zionism. The poster would do this, but I just saw something on here that
Oh, Sandy, I'll just say things are, maybe I'm a little bit behind in the stream, but things are looking a little bit. Never mind, they're fixed. I'm sorry, I was
oh,
behind.
okay, yeah. No, that was my fault. I clicked something wrong. Um, but I'm just reading this poster suddenly, and I'm like, I don't like all the names on it.
That's what that's again,
Hmm.
I don't want folks to feel either that they're at fault or they're at blame, or that they feel some type of way to be able to blame or attack other folks. Like, if you are receiving this information, if you're one of the number of folks who are receiving this information, use that as a learning opportunity for people who are pro Palestine to sharpen their lenses. And then use that as a learning opportunity for maybe people who are a little bit less sharp on the edges to be able to understand what's going on. Because
Hmm.
again, this is a propaganda war. I wish that George Orwell was, like, more of a hipster thing that, like, no one ever heard of, because George Orwell's analysis is really more prescient than ever in a lot of ways. And you know, you heard it here first. I'm doing a new series that allows me to not focus so much on creating high production videos, but focus on creating like meaty videos that
Mhm.
meet the moment of the time so I can create them faster. But one thing I really need to make is or one thing I really have been thinking of making is on that specific subject that I've been kind of like speaking about over the past couple minutes is like making sure people have that ability to not just know like, okay, here's a list of sources to trust or here's a list of sources to not trust, because we don't need to get into this, but as you and I know very clearly, you trust a source today, fuck a source tomorrow, right?
Yep.
Like things can change. And also, fuck a source today, they make some points tomorrow, right? So you need to not just be able
Mhm.
to have a hit list of like what's good and what's bad. You need to know how to look for the attributes of what is good and what's bad to be able to truly and not, sarcastically call balls and strikes, to be able to say, this group and that group, they're wrong on this stuff and right on this stuff. And this is when I would generally trust them. And this is when I would generally be like, hang on, they've been iffy on this other thing. So I need to be more careful.
Yeah.
Because I think that as we are, sorry to filibuster as I always do, but 10 seconds as we're radicalizing more people in this specific moment of the plight that has been going on for Palestinians, not since October 7th, but since
Mhm.
1947, since even beyond that, because British mandatory Palestine was a thing in 1946 and a little bit before that as well. As we're radicalizing people to this moment, as they're paying attention, we must also, as leftists who would have been radicalized by this moment, whether normies were paying attention or not, develop the skills to be able to radicalize those normies to make sure that in future situations, they can sharpen themselves against the sharks, the vultures, the grifters that are going to be coming from the right for them, because they now realize that this moment is marketable and this moment is something they can capitalize on. And we need to fortify the left and people who are rightfully radicalized by this moment on a human rights progressive level against the bullshit that's going to come their way, because it's
Yeah.
happened before and it's going to happen again.
Yeah. Just just absolutely crazy that this can even happen. Yeah, Grand Theft Autobot in the Sandbox is just saying, just woke up from a nap, and the first thing I see, a pro-genocide comedy show. What the fuck?
You know, right?
Yeah, but let's see the caliber of people that they're that this will benefit.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Israeli forces kill 3 Palestinian fighters in West Bank hospital raid. Israeli forces have killed 3 members of Palestinian armed groups in a hospital in the occupied West Bank. CCTV footage shows members of an undercover unit disguised as medics and other civilians making their way through the corridor with rifles raised. The Israeli military said the men were hiding in the hospital and that one of them was about to carry out an attack. Uh-huh. Yeah, I believe that. So basically, yeah, they went into a hospital dressed as civilians and shot people in the West Bank. This is not Hamas. This is West Bank. Hamas isn't in the West Bank. But they were apparently hiding in this hospital. Some horrible people were hiding in there that were then going to do an attack. But
Yeah. I mean, so because of the number of people I have in my life, again, not because of
mhm,
my particular opinions, I have to come at this from like, how much benefit of the doubt can I possibly give you before I have to tell you what's actually going on and what you are not
mhm,
you necessarily, but what a lot of people who come into this, like, Israel has a right to defend itself, and Israel is the only state where Jewish people are safe. Like from that kind of crowd who hasn't really had the time to properly dissect their previous analyses and start to deconstruct them for the propaganda that they really are. Um, you know, I wish that Israel and their, supposed cover and their attempt to be like, we are predominantly attacking centers of power for Hamas, that they would do operations like this. Because again, I wish that if Obama had just done, again, if the United States, for general, had done the bin Laden raid as opposed to everything that had happened in Iran and Afghanistan. Listen,
Yeah.
militarism sucks, but Yahtzee, all right? Like,
Hmm.
you found the guy who helped orchestrate this really terrible attack on the internal, like, safety of your country and your citizens. And you want to like stand about that shit. Like, I understand that on a lot of general levels, okay? What I don't understand, and I think what people from a progressive, truly leftist perspective don't understand, are the massive indiscriminate killing of civilians for political gain, if like, nothing else. And there's like virtually no situation in which civilians should be just considered as, random collateral damage that we don't care about. But when you're just talking about these situations, when we're getting back to 2023 and 24, and we're talking about what's happening with Israel and the Palestinians, and like there are Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, and there are Palestinians in the West Bank, and there are Palestinians who have been part of a Palestinian diaspora over predating the 20th century, but especially the 20th and the 21st century. You're seeing the ramifications of that. And, so they're, again, when I say all of that, I say they're attacking a hospital, they're coming in disguised as whatever. Maybe if I give you the most benefit of the doubt, that situation, that like, oh, they're doing a targeted attack, they're going after these selected officials. Okay. But what happens when you've done what Israel has done? Well, you've effectively killed, you know, closer conservative numbers are around 25,000 at time of recording at the early start of February in 2024. Numbers that are consider the folks that are under rubble in Palestine put it at closer to 30,000, 30,000 plus civilians who have been killed. When, the most over optimistic, ridiculous numbers of the number of people who are in Hamas pre October 7th were like 15, 20, 30,000 people is absurd. It's
Hmm.
ridiculous. It's when you put these facts up against, any rational sort of act, which the International Court of Justice pretends to be, are ridiculous facts and are things
Hmm.
that you have to start to hold Israel account for. And once you see they haven't held themselves to account for it, you start to lessen their credibility. In a
Hmm.
financial state, you would say like, oh, their credit rating is lowered from a triple A to a double A plus, or to a B, or to a C, or to a D, or to an F, right? Like, you start to reassess how you trust this organization because of how they have horrendously misled you.
Yeah.
And that is the point where Israel is at. And even
Hmm.
when they do, actions like this, I'm like, why are you in a hospital when we have information? Even the lying American press has found information of you constructing hospitals of you
Hmm.
constructing tunnels underneath hospitals in Gaza.
Hmm.
And that's why Hamas may or may not have tunnels there. And that's why you're carpet bombing these hospitals, which are, by the way, still serving as hospitals because you're carpet bombing the civilians,
Hmm.
and the civilians need to have places to go. And not only are the civilians being targeted in those hospitals, but Israel brags about a system where apparently they're nicer because they lightly tap on the hospitals before they carpet bomb the shit out of not only the people who are already wounded, but the people taking care of them and the first responders to that, and the evacuees around that, and the citizens around that. Like, I'm about to have a Cenk Uygur moment by how pissed I am at the
Yeah.
situation. But like that's how much is what's going on. And that's why there's less legitimacy when
Mhm.
you have even these like targeted situations like this. It's like it is 30,000 lives since October 7th, but millions of lives killed and displaced way too late for
Mhm.
y'all to start taking the moral high ground. Fuck ya.
Yeah. Yeah, because what a lot of people don't take into consideration with the death count is, the median age there being 18. It means people are dying a lot sooner than they should be dying. So the amount of like social murder, like the amount of things that are put into place so that people don't live long lives, people who are dying before they should be dying, that's not even taken into consideration with a lot of the numbers that we hear. But also at this point, I would like the IDF to even prove that there's active members of Hamas, like Hamas members in Gaza actively trying to plot against them right now because
Oh,
they
I mean,
killed
like
a couple of
there
the leaders.
are,
Yeah.
but like I don't believe that Israel has kept track
Mhm.
of them,
Yeah.
right?
Well, they
Like
killed a couple of the leaders in Lebanon. Like, they're not even in Gaza, some of them. Like, the most powerful ones had the means to actually get out of Gaza.
I've always said that like benefit of the doubt, if Biden was like, let's find the American hostages, let's find the Israeli hostages, let's get those civilians out of, Hamas's arms and harm's way more broadly, that would have been a moral high ground they could have attempted to go from. But instead, they've gone with this carpet bombing initiative. They don't care about the
Mm-hmm.
hostages. Israel has killed several
Yes.
hostages in very discriminate, well documented moments, not to mention killing the journalists who were covering that coverage.
Yeah.
And so like, the, every second the Joe Biden administration continues to go with this genocidal regime is another second that they tie themselves to the boat of skydiving uh legitimacy
Mm-hmm.
and skydiving trust that Netanyahu's regime is creating for Israel. And
Yeah.
again, it's unfortunate because I started this whole rant with saying I have lovely friends who practice or come from the practice culturally of the Jewish religion. Hell, I have people I dislike personally who just happen to come from the Jewish religion, much like I have people of all backgrounds who I happen to dislike personally. I don't care. I believe they have human rights. I believe they deserve the right to live. I believe they deserve the right to feel safe and to practice their beliefs just as anyone else does, but not at the expense of someone else's rights to do all of those same
Mm-hmm.
things. And that goes for everyone.
Yeah.
That's a really consistent stance I have that I'm sad to say our last standing hope against pure out fascism in this country still can't stand by, which is in itself a practice of fascism.
Yeah. It is. We'll get into our country's support of what's happening right now in just a moment, but yeah,
Do I
at the
have like a minute break while you make a point,
yeah,
perhaps?
sure.
Cool. I will be right back. You can take me off stage. I don't know if that helps your production.
Yeah. Oops. Probably shouldn't have done it in that order. But anyway, Um, Owen Jones was just stating with this imagine Hamas stormed a hospital disguised as doctor, nurses, patients, and civilian women and executed 3 Israelis. It would be front page news. It would be offered up as evidence of their outrageous evil. I doubt many media outlets will even be covering this. And, I definitely understand Dan's point towards like if this was actual, stopping the bad people before they did stuff. But at this point, I don't trust anything the IDF is saying when it comes to their targets because they have been proven over and over and over again to be lying, like right out lying about what they're doing. And yeah, it is just disgusting that you have a group like this is in the West Bank again. Hamas isn't based in the West Bank. So now suddenly there's terrorists in the West Bank that they have to do this type of thing towards. Like they executed the people in the hospital. Like they couldn't have handcuffed them, taken them into be tried in a court of law. It is just, to do that in a place like a hospital is just so disgusting. I just, like, there's no safe places for any Palestinians anywhere in the West Bank, in Israel, in Gaza. This is the treatment that they're going to get. And yet, as Owen points out, yeah, if Hamas had done this, if they had dressed up like civilians and gone and killed a couple Israelis, this would just be more like, well, do you condemn Hamas type um, motive towards them. Like it would just be more ammunition for that. It's like, oh well, do you condemn Hamas for doing this horrible attack where they were disguised as people going into a hospital? Just, oh, absolutely horrible. Okay, I'll do this really quick because it looks like Dan is back. There. Yeah, I'm sharing the screen so they see when I do that.
It's all good. I'll just tell you this. I had a phase where I was like, you know what? I'm gonna use OBS along with StreamYard and like make it work. I've given up. I've embraced it. You know what?
Yeah.
It's a privilege for sure for the StreamYard subscription, but like you know what? It's so much easier to produce, and I like the end result. So you know what? I'm ready to go. It's all
Well,
fine.
I deal with what my means allow me to deal with. So this is
I respect it.
yeah.
Sorry, could you mind reading really fast again the original comment because I was listening to the whole thing and I just want to
Mhm.
rejigger like the point that I had in my head, and I promise I'll be fast.
Yeah, the Owen Jones tweet.
Um. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
if Hamas had stormed a hospital disguised as doctors, nurses, patients, and civilian women and executed 3 Israelis, it would be front page news. I mean, that runs so, you know, directly to the original human shields argument, which has, by the way, been the winning creative. It has been the don't reinvent the wheel kind of argument for, again, not just Israel, but it's worked so well for Israel
Mhm.
that other regimes that are actively, you know, committing massive atrocities towards populations of people, specifically because they are those populations of those people, have used the human shield's defense as a justification for what they're doing. And so, yeah, it is. I think that's a very good point made. That oh, even you know Hamas is not using the human shields
Mhm.
argument because they were disguised.
Mhm.
And even me, like as a Westerner, and I still stand 10 toes on this position, whether you're in the West or whether you're, you know, opposed to the West, disguises in war are fair game. All right. Like I think that's fair game all around. Like that's, you know, I again
They're not at
similarly,
war though.
well, yeah, I think Hamas and
Mhm.
Israel, the IDF are at war,
Yeah.
but the IDF is also doing a side war against the civilian population,
Mhm.
and that's where all of this gets messed up,
Yeah,
right?
because
So,
again, there was no indication that the people they were targeting were Hamas, just some general people that might be committing terrorist attacks. Instead of actually like arresting them because they're in a freaking hospital, like where are they going? Like one was actually recovering from injuries. They could have
yes,
arrested them. Instead,
yes,
they just executed them.
and folks need to understand that, like, Hamas has definitely gotten a victory here, along with the Houthis, along with a lot of other rebel groups, in proving that they can stand up to, you know,
Mhm.
Western imperialism more broadly.
Mhm.
And, you know, that is very true.
Mhm.
And these individual rebel groups have their own interests at
Mhm.
hand more than the interests of civilians living their
Oh yeah.
lives.
Oh
All
yeah.
right. So don't think that, like, please, again, don't in like, I see other people believing this. Don't in a very, you know, simple minded North American perspective believe that just because they are fighting against Western imperialism, that they are the good guys against innocent civilians because
I've
it ain't
already,
like that.
yeah.
It ain't like that. And I know, and I'm pretty sure because I know you have a very smart audience that most folks don't believe that, but as these words travel throughout the internet, I want it to be known that that guy driving by me has a loud engine, but I
Yes.
also want it to be known that these, you know, individual groups that have like
Mhm.
built resistance and built connections, the Houthis related to Iran and a lot of other stuff we can talk about separately, but
Mhm.
like these aren't the good guys. This is at best Deadpool. All right. Like this is at best like an anti-hero. But you
Mhm.
gotta understand that like these are also villains and these are also heroes, and that life and politics is not a Marvel movie and it gets mad complex. So
Yeah. Nah,
yeah,
I've already stated some
I think
of my
most folks
beliefs
get
on this.
that, but
Yeah.
too many folks don't.
Yeah. Because do I think the Houthis are the heroes in it? No, no. I think they're just using this as an excuse to do what they want, just like the States is using what the Houthis did as an excuse to do what they want. Just like Israel is
Hamas.
using what Hamas did as an excuse to do what they want. Like it's just I don't think the Houthis are doing it out of any sort of benevolence or empathy towards.
Outside of civilian populations, there are no real righteous
Mhm.
causes here.
Yeah. So it is just to jump like that's the thing why I don't usually like reporting news when I first hear about it is like like to get a little bit more information about it, but when you first hear about, what the Houthis were doing and stuff and people just jumping to conclusions about, oh, they're anti-imperialist and all that sort of stuff, therefore they must be the good guys. And it's like, yeah, I don't I want to look a little bit more into that before you start cheering them on.
I just want to say shout out to Grand Theft Autobot in the chat saying, now I think Deadpool and the Punisher would be more likely to go after the IDF. And if you're really accurate to how those characters have been written in, both comics and like other media and not how they've been appropriated by chuds, you're 100% right. You're
Yeah.
100% right.
Actually, that's a movie
I'm
I want to see.
Deadpool and the Punisher.
Yeah, going after IDF.
Oh, that rocks.
That's the
That
movie I want to see. That's Marvel. Come on. Come on.
the fact that we got a Black Panther that was adversarial to the CIA that also had a sequel that was, slightly adversarial to the CIA, but also lending, idea to the fact that CIA was right, even though they're absolutely wrong and trying to pit
Hmm.
people of color against each other. That's a separate video that other great YouTubers have made. Um, Again, I would like to see that kind of movie.
Hmm.
Also, fuck superhero movie executives. Let's move on. I'm done filibustering your show for now.
Yes. So, on to like some Canadian aspect of this. Trudeau government admits it authorized new military exports to Israel after October 7th. And the reason why I'm pointing this out is, here is my government, your government, saying that because there were 12 people who were maybe part of Hamas, that this is all alleged, that are also part of UNRWA. They're going to end all their funding towards UNRWA, which is the UN resources within Gaza that actually get supplies and food and medicine to the people. And there's something like 13,000 people part of it. But they're going to stop their funding because of allegedly 12 people who might be part of uh, Hamas. And yet you see what the IDF just did going into that hospital and executing people. And yet we're still going to fund them. This country is still going to fund them and everything they do. And it is just, this is such a Canadian article too, because Global Affairs Canada says exports are non-lethal. We're only sending them non-lethal weapons, but human rights activists say the term offers little reassurance. So basically it's like, well, we only send them like the scope and the bullets to the rifles, but we don't send them the actual rifles. Like we only
Okay.
send the fuels for the drones. We don't actually send them the drones. Like that's pretty much what it is. Like we just send them all the parts, but since those parts individually don't do the killing, therefore they're non-lethal things that we're sending to Israel.
God, I was trying so hard to like, I want to let you speak, but like I need to work on my host skills, like keeping track of so much double speak at once. And there was something they said at the beginning there that was like ridiculous. That was like the first point you made. That was just like, okay, that makes no sense. And please bring that up if you like remember it, like remember that first part. But the second part of like non-lethal weapons, I'm thinking back to the lethal weapons movies and like also the dictionary definition of lethal weapons. I'm like, it's not like Canada only produces the Mario guns that like shoot stars, right? Like, no, Canada has all the subsidiaries that America has that
Mhm.
also have subsidiaries in Mexico, because oftentimes us Americans can get cheaper labor from y'all. And like we're still able to make these weapons that we ship off to other countries that are more likely to get into, again, like not hot wars, but
Mhm.
continuations of conflicts that they're already perpetuating.
Well, that's the thing a lot of Canadians don't realize is every overseas conflicts that you see the United States involved with, we're involved with. And it's usually in instances like this. Like, a lot of the weapons going to Saudi Arabia and stuff of that sort. Sure, we weren't necessarily sending the drones or the jets, but we were sending the fuel to make them fly. And we spend like hundreds of millions of dollars in weapons. Like we export so many weapons. Like that's one of our biggest exports to all these regimes. So that's why I'm constantly saying too is we need more cross-border solidarity because if the Americans stop sending money and weapons to Israel, that just means more business for Canada.
Also, I'm trying to kind of get at the first thing you kind of led this with, which is that the Trudeau government has
Mhm.
admitted that since October 7th, after
Mhm.
seeing,
The
everything
horrors.
that's gone on,
Yeah.
all of the horrors that everything else has seen, after seeing, the
Mhm.
internal demonstrations that have gone on inside Canada, inside of a lot of, great places by the burgeoning grassroots left that does exist in North America, counted it as, greater Canada, the continental United States, plus Alaska and Hawaii, and then Mexico. Like all of those countries together, you see grassroots movements of people demonstrating in
Mhm.
major cities, going free Palestine, from the sea to the river, Palestine will live forever. Like
Mhm.
you hear all these different things, and you see all these governments, admittedly, again, I'm trying to do this in
Mhm.
2024. I will admit when I'm not speaking from a lot of knowledge. So I've not been paying too much attention to the relationship between AMLO and Israel Palestine. But I am aware of Biden and I am privy to Trudeau.
Mhm.
And I understand that they are very much like, complicit is an extreme understatement
Oh, yeah.
to the horrible atrocities that are going
Yeah.
on there.
It's aiding.
And sorry, last thing, they're also complicit in the
Mhm.
complete ignorance. I say this as someone who has been a protester at one of Biden's big
Mhm.
fundraisers in Los Angeles, where you make a lot of money from, milk toast Democrats.
Mhm.
His complicity, even despite members of his supposed coalition, members of his supposed constituency, members of the voters that he is relying on to fight against the supposed dangers of Donald Trump, even though he is ignoring them for cash money dollars.
Yeah.
Just like a Republican would,
Mhm.
just like Bloc Québécois person would, just like any sort of like conservative person in Canada would,
Mhm.
right? Like, and in fact, I'm sure, as I can imagine, just as too many quote unquote progressives in Canada have done.
Mhm. Yeah. People have a hard time understanding just the image of Canada versus what Canada actually is.
A lot of countries,
Yeah,
same
but
same
we've
vibe.
we've had like protests outside of some of the weapon manufacturers, but it's not like that gets any of the news or anything. And like just the like aiding and abetting at this point, everything Israel's doing. The fact that we're still sending them the weapons and stuff. The fact that as soon as the ICJ said, yeah, it's probable genocide happening here, so Israel must, send in aid and stuff like that, and suddenly we cut our funding to the aid, but then say, oh, but we're going to send it other ways. And it's like, but there's no thing on the ground in Gaza, no structure, no organization that's already built in that's actually
That
able to
infrastructure is
distribute it.
actively being ripped apart.
Mhm. Yeah, so just a little bit from this article. Following weeks of questions from the Maple and human rights advocates, Global Affair Canada admitted in a statement sent to the Maple this week that it has authorized new permits for unspecified military exports to Israel since October 7th. So that the GAC described the goods as non lethal equipment, but an arms monitoring expert told the Maple that the term does not have a fixed legal definition, meaning the exports could include items being used by Israel in its brutal war on Gaza. So there's no this could be used, like we're sending them stuff that's being used on the brutal attacks in Gaza, and it makes me sick that any of
Yeah.
our taxpayer money is going towards this, any of Canadian like money is going towards this. It is just it makes me sick. Plus, not to mention at this point, it's going against the ICJ ruling. And so, like, yeah, arrest them all. Arrest all of our politicians because of it. I would like that.
And again, like, I'm gonna test a way of arguing a point with your audience, and maybe it'll go over great, and maybe it won't, and it'll just be like a wonderful moment that you get to have for your audience, right? But in America, especially, there's this whole like, despite everything that's happened, vote Joe Biden versus, Yahtzee. I'm throwing in my hat for Donald Trump, but Joe Biden is actively supporting a genocide. What's the point anymore? In addition to a number of socio-political and economic conditions that are already happening, not just in the United States, but across the world, in Africa, in Central Asia, in North Asia with Russia and Ukraine, and in Latin America. And so, I am personally set on the fact that there are sorry, let me organize this in like my like hot take kind of way, I guess, right? um I want to challenge everyone who is out there to really tell me and like really lay it out that on January 20, let's call it January 30th, when a lot of like, edginess could roll out, right? Let's call it January 30th, when the dust has settled from whatever dust may or may not have to settle in the United States after the election in 2025, January 31st, 2025. 30th, 31st. How does that month work? Whatever. End of January 2025. How does the dust settle? Whether or not that dust settles. Do you want the Democrats to be in charge? Where these are weak pieces of shit who barely got across the line, who have a coalition who barely got them across the line, full of pastors of color, indigenous folks, people of color, black voters who are at their throats for the things they haven't been serving them for? Or would you rather have the Republican Party who doesn't give a fuck? Right? Because I hate both of them. As I've said, I'm on that side of the Democratic Party coalition who may vote for some people, or at least consider some people who are on that listing, even on a local level, so long as they have publicly stated and stood on 10 toes with the things that I care about, that'll not just keep the status quo, but will keep things moving. All right. But I know, as a person who is built coalitions, who has knocked on doors, who's actually gotten off of the goddamn internet and fought for things, that it is way easier to fight the Democratic Party, to push them to the left, than to fight Republicans to push them to the left. That's all I've got as a pitch for, not even Joe Biden as a Democrat, but for down ballot, left of center things, even if they may be disappointing you in moments before, during, and after what's going on with your country, North America, in your continent, your hemisphere, and Palestine. But knowing that when you wake up after your next election, you will be able to break the backs of liberals much easier than you can break the backs as a coalition of these bloodthirsty, sick, vengeful fucks on the general right who want genocide of people of color, who fight against the browning of America, who are, fighting against, immigration from the South, whether it's Europe or Canada or the United States. You'd rather fight against those people? I'm sorry, man, but like we're not
Mhm.
having the same argument. We're not having the same coalitional power-based
Mhm.
argument.
Yeah, I have a rant in me at some point that probably closer to your election I'm going to let out, but it is along those lines.
Save it for my
Yeah,
show, please. I'm just kidding, but
it
like
is.
I
It
would love to
is.
have you on Power Report
Yeah,
for that. So
it
let's
is.
keep that in mind.
Yeah, it is closer. It is to what you're saying because you know a lot of our concern about the genocide over there will be taken away when we're trying to prevent our own genocide here. Should the Republicans get in, it is just because we'll
Yeah.
get into some of the queer news and the things that are happening in the States just are so horrific and it travels up here. We're not safe up here. The culture and everything, the stochastic terrorism, there's already been an attack on queer folks targeting people like me in my community. Like, it is just, not to mention, it's the labor rights taken away, it's the rights to personal autonomy that would be taken away. It's like so many other things will be taken away that we won't be able to work towards fighting the system when we are literally just trying to fight to stay alive at that point. And so, yeah, and not voting Biden in won't stop the genocide. It Trump will probably make it a lot easier for Israel, actually. Uh, let's
I don't want people to be doomers because there's a lot of things. I mean, not to tease my Power Report
mhm.
tomorrow at youtube.com/Dan for the internet, but like there will be a lot of we have a doomer rundown, but we also have some very hilarious things that are not just like levity from politics more broadly, but I think we have a couple of bright spots here and
Mhm.
there that
Yeah.
we can look at.
Well, back in Canadian news, we have here, so this is Matthew Green. He's an MP from Hamilton. He's really hoping there would be a leadership
The
race for the
musical?
NDP. Mm-hmm. Yes. Really hoping that there was going to be a leadership race and that he would step up because he would do far better for the NDP, I think, than Jagmeet Singh by far. But this is also, again, there's a quirky Canadian twist to this story that we'll get to in a moment. But also, this is a very serious story and it connects to something that people should be reminded of. So let's go back to this statement here that he made in Parliament.
Center. When it comes to the over 25,000 Palestinians killed by Netanyahu's brutal bombardment, the Liberals have done nothing to uphold international law.
So right off the bat, the fact that he is calling out Netanyahu and, the Israeli government is for a person in a political party to do that here in Canada is already quite a bold stance because Sarah Jama for the provincial NDP was kicked out of the party for doing just that earlier. So being this bold in Canadian politics, it's quite the thing.
And protect innocent civilian lives. And when it comes to Islamophobia and anti-Palestinian hate crimes, the Liberals have failed to stop it here in Canada. The community feels so betrayed that yesterday, the National Council of Canadian Muslims canceled their meeting with the Prime Minister because they are tired of his broken lies. So, what will it take?
So for people who aren't aware, and they'll mention this in a moment, Matthew Green did a big no-no in Canadian Parliament, which is something that is totally unacceptable.
The honourable member is an experienced parliamentarian. He knows very well that we cannot accuse honourable members of deliberately lying. That is a unparliamentary language.
How dare you accuse someone of lying in the Canadian Parliament? That's the uproar with this, mostly.
Ask the
Is
honourable
decorum.
member to withdraw that comment.
Mr. Speaker, I withdraw because they are tired of the broken promises. So, what will it take for this Liberal government to listen and start protecting Palestinian lives in Gaza and combat Islamophobia and anti-Palestinian hate here in Canada?
The Honourable Minister for International Development.
So this is the guy that on Friday put out the post saying, yeah, we're no longer going to fund UNRWA.
An opportunity to talk about the announcement we made today precisely to deal with this issue. $40 million additional to deliver life-saving food, medicine, and other supplies to Palestinians through.
Only there's no way to actually get it to the people in Gaza right now. There's no structure in place for that.
Through trusted international partners, including the World Health Organization, the World Food Program, UNICEF, and many others. We've always centered our decisions around the protection of innocent civilians in Gaza, and through this allocation, we have upped our game to $100 million in humanitarian assistance to Palestinians.
Because, like, it's really fast. If I understand correctly, isn't Canada part of that coalition that is taking away funds from UNRWA, which is like one of the last, vestiges that is providing aid to Palestinians, which, if the International Criminal Court, which, shut up, Bam, International Court of Justice, which is different from the International Criminal Court, which has even less teeth than the International Criminal Court. The International Court of Justice, where this whole case was tried and that got a lot of attention for, to channel Bam from Power Report, it especially has no teeth. But even if it did, its demands were that Israel at least account for the amount of aid that needs to be let into Palestine and to allow for safe travel of that aid, and hasn't been doing that before October 7th, during October 7th, or after October 7th. So it's like tough talk for anyone to be saying otherwise. I'm glad there are folks who are willing to speak out in the right way of that, because it's such a tragedy.
Yeah, it's just, oh no, the decorum. Because apparently Matthew Green also said, like, how do you sleep at night, bro? And he's called out, like, how dare he use such unparliamentary language in the House? Shucks darn. But he says, like, what's missing here, though, is the context of the decision to cut critical funding to UNRWA despite the ICJ interim orders to provide humanitarian aid to Palestinians in Gaza experience plausible genocide. So yeah, we were one of the first countries to cut our funding to that as soon as, just so happens that the same day the ICJ came out with this ruling, oh, there's this alleged connection to Hamas with 12 members. But there's a reason why this is more poignant today, or, well, when this was done. So January 29th was the anniversary of the 7th anniversary of the Quebec City mosque attack, one of the deadliest mass shootings here in Canada. And here are people from the Muslim community basically saying they've had it with Justin Trudeau in his treatment of people. So we have here, I guess, Stephen Brown, CEO of the National Council of Canadian Muslims, speaks with reporters at Ottawa on the 7th anniversary of Quebec City mosque shooting. 6 people were killed and 19 injured when a gunman stormed the Islamic Cultural Center on January 29th, 2017. So they canceled their meeting, but we'll hear from him.
Ready? My fellow Canadians, today I stand before you joined by hundreds of many Canadian Muslim leaders from across the country. We come here today because today is the 7th anniversary of the Quebec Mosque Massacre. Just last week, we heard the sentencing arguments for the London terror attacker who took the lives of 3 generations of families in London, Ontario. We remember their names: Khaled Belkacemi, Azzedine Soufiane, Abu Bakr Thabi, Mamadou Tamouberry, Ibrahima Berry, Abdelkrim Hassan, Mohammed Azim Zafis, Talat Afzal, Yumna Afzal, Salman Afzal, Madiha Salman. There's a simple truth that brings us here today, is that Canada has suffered more mass killings motivated by Islamophobia in the past 7 years than any other country in the G7. We come today representing the leadership of our community, doctors, lawyers, progressive supporters, imams, writers, entertainers, entrepreneurs, moms and dads, and everybody in between, because we believe in Canada. We believe in each other, and we believe that our fellow Canadians have always had our back. Canadians have always been consistent in their commitment to a just society. Because that's what being Canadian is all about. Being tough but fair, it's about courage, it's about integrity. We're proud Canadian identities and proud to have deep roots in this country. My own ancestors came to Canada through the Underground Railroad. Fleeing the horrific institution of slavery in the United States, we followed the North Star to come here to find freedom. As Canadians, we continue to stand with integrity, and that's why we've spent the day engaging with members of all parties, and we continue to have a number of important meetings set for this afternoon. However, today, we, representing the vast majority of the Canadian Muslim leadership from coast to coast, have officially canceled our meeting with the Prime Minister. At this moment, we no longer think it's productive to speak with this Prime Minister. As community leaders, we will continue to engage elected officials across the country. This is an unprecedented step for us. We've always engaged with our government and in our democratic process, and always agreed to meet and engage precisely because this Prime Minister came to us with great promise and did deliver on select things that Canadians had asked for, to reverse a dark time of division after 2015. However, that great promise now feels broken and perhaps beyond repair. As we stand here today, our government has consistently noted that it believes in multilateral institutions like the United Nations and the International Criminal Court of Justice. Yet that hasn't stopped Canada from refusing to take any accountability in responding to the provisional measures and ignoring international law by refusing to take seriously any of what the ICJ ordered as provisional measures. Instead, they've compromised the integrity of the international rule-based order and the ICJ by challenging the premise of the case. When our government says
Yeah, for people who don't know, they're basically, even after the ruling of the ICJ, Melanie Joly, one of the ministers, said, yeah, we still don't believe the premise of the case that South Africa brought against Israel. Like, we're still not going to go with it, even though it's already been ruled on.
Says that we take international law and the slaughter of thousands of children seriously, we think Canadians will agree. This government doesn't anymore. But it's not only that. As we stand here today, our government has failed to move on substantive hate crime legislation. We stand here today, the government has failed on its promise to institute a victim of hate support fund that would have supported victims like the survivors of the Quebec City mosque massacre. As we stand here today, mosques continue to be targeted across the country in an unprecedented spike of Islamophobia. The words flow effortlessly every time there is a new attack, a new hate crime. Politicians have learned the script. They're shocked, they offer condemnation, they offer their support and say this can't happen again. But it does. It happens again and again, and we hear the same words again. And as much as this inaction has disappointed us in the past, and trust us, even simple asks like performing the security infrastructure program haven't become fulfilled. Over the last 3 months, we've heard our government offer justification and cover for the killing of innocent men, women, and children in Gaza. We've watched as they stood quietly by while journalists were targeted and killed. We've seen members of this government justify the targeting of hospitals and schools where thousands have been taken shelter. We've seen the feminist foreign policy Canada so proudly speaks about becoming silent in the face of women and girls who've been slaughtered by the thousands. We've seen the government that stood strongly in support of the Afghan girls, the right of Afghan girls to go to school, forget that children in Gaza deserve the same right to an education too. There's almost no mosque left in Canada where there is not any congregant who hasn't lost a member of their family in Gaza. The Prime Minister yet.
That is pretty devastating to hear.
I'm genuinely impressed that Stephen Brown, right? This is him.
Yeah.
I'm genuinely impressed that he is being this bold and courageous because, like, quite frankly, you don't see this in American media ever.
No.
And, like, this is stuff that, I can say as, just as an individual Black person, but also someone who understands how Black politics has gone. A lot of Black politics in America is like, you bite your tongue, even though you have these Democrats who say one thing, get in office, and then forget that thing that they, got your hopes up for in order to get in office, because they're better than the alternative. And you're just, 20 years later, you wake up and you're still doing the same bite your tongue thing. And then those people have kids, and then those people have kids. And that's kind of where I'm at right now, where I'm
Mhm.
like, I'm so sick of this cycle, and I'm
Yep.
so fundamentally tired of this cycle. And so to see that kind of direct talk, even when his context is, 9 years ago from 2015, I think he's talking about like a seventh anniversary
Yeah, it's the
tragedy, never
seventh
mind. But
anniversary.
like, okay, so my apologies. So he's talking from even less than, three generations of trauma, which can be
Mhm.
as much as, a century, but, as less as like, 50, 60 years, right? Um, that is, I give him a lot of props. I give him a lot of respect.
Has not specifically condemned any attack on any mosque or Muslim person in
Let's just
Canada
back
in the
that up
last
a
few
bit.
months. Feminist foreign policy Canada so proudly speaks about, becoming silent in the face of women and girls who've been slaughtered by the thousands. We've seen the government that stood strongly in support of the Afghan girls, the right of Afghan girls to go to school, forget that children in Gaza deserve the same right to an education too. There's almost no mosque left in Canada where there is not any congregant who hasn't lost a member of their family in Gaza. The Prime Minister yet has not specifically condemned any attack on any mosque or Muslim person in Canada in the last few months, despite us repeatedly raising those attacks with the Prime Minister's office. A Calgarian, a journalist, a graduate from Queen's University, was apparently kidnapped by the Israeli state agents over the weekend. Our Prime Minister has said nothing to protect the safety of Canadian citizens, of this Canadian citizen. Apparently a Canadian is not a Canadian, is not a Canadian. And that's why we're here today. We don't have much to say to the Prime Minister now. We've met the Prime Minister when he came to Quebec City Mosque in 2017 and said that there would be action. We met the Prime Minister when he came to London in 2021 after the massacre and said that there would be action. We hear from our constituents, representing millions of Canadian Muslims, that it has become clear that what we seem to only get a sliver of policy reform when our lives or our safety is destroyed. Poll after poll has shown that the majority
Wait,
of
can we
Canadians
pause it
want to
there?
see action to call for.
Like, sorry, like a
Mhm.
sliver of policy reform while our lives are destroyed. Like,
Yeah.
that is there's a lot being said right there that are like bars upon bars. But like, if anyone who is watching needs to take anything out from that, or needs to share anything out from that, or needs to, maybe be tuning out, but like needs to really like check into that, that's what it is right there.
Mhm.
Because slivers like hopes being destroyed, and trying so hard for like slivers of help, is not just a story that is resonant and heartbreaking for Muslims and the Palestinian people right now, but name any sort of cause that has happened over the past 4 years, even since COVID. And that's so much has happened since then that I think that's like an easy thing for people to grasp onto. But if you have a longer memory, go to 2010. Think of how much has happened with gun violence, with indigenous violence, Native American violence, as we call it down here. Um, and also gun violence in
Mhm.
America, especially, is very well known. So much pain, so much mobilization, abortion rights, trans and non-binary equality and rights and recognition and safety in this world. So much mobility, so slivers, if that, of return from our politicians.
Mhm.
What is the point of democracy if you're not getting this?
Yeah.
I know that's a very controversial statement. I mean it.
Mhm. Yeah. No, this person is such a
It's
great
very
leader.
bold. And
Yeah.
again, I haven't really heard much of them outside of
Mhm.
this. Again, I'm trying to be very careful with my words in 2024. This action is very bold. Not sure if I can stand by every single person this has ever been, every single action this person's ever done, but this is very bold, and they've earned a decent amount of respect from me from this action and how measured they are, but while also being very direct about what's going
Mhm.
on.
No, to say this to the Prime Minister on the anniversary of this tragedy, it is quite the statement.
For peace in Gaza, and they want to see serious is destroyed. That what we seem to only get a sliver of policy reform when our lives or our safety is destroyed. Poll after poll has shown that the majority of Canadians want to see action to call for peace in Gaza, and they want to see serious policy action on us standing up for just human rights causes, because this is who we are as a nation that stands up for peace and justice for all people, whether Palestinian or Israeli or any other race or nationality. Yet the Prime Minister appears to simply not be interested in the will of Canadians. This has unfortunately been the progress of years and months of a clear pattern where the Prime Minister has demonstrated that he is no longer interested in listening to the interests of our community. This is a tragic decay in our relationship from a leader that we welcomed into our houses and our hearts as he welcomed refugees and talked about sunnier ways.
Wait, can I ask to pause
Members
again?
of our community were literally...
Sorry, I think if I'm remembering correctly, it was like he's no longer showing interest in our communities, like another bar.
Mhm.
Because I don't feel like neither Joe Biden nor Kamala Harris shows any interest in the Black community or, any sort of intersectionality that I have. I'm a mixed race person, a queer person. There's so much within that I don't think that the Biden administration is like really showing support towards, especially when this is the week when you know damn near 100 different Black pastors came out to Joe Biden directly saying, we are your core constituent Bible Belt base for the Black community. Not to be, big on alliteration right there, although I do love it from time to time. But like, we are calling for a ceasefire in Gaza because we understand what solidarity with the plight of marginalized people looks like. And Joe Biden, you are not standing by it right now. And
Mhm.
Justin Trudeau, you are not standing by it right now. Much appreciation and courage to this guy. Also, I need to jump off for like 2-3 minutes or so. So sorry about that, but I'm still
Okay.
listening to everything, if you don't
Okay.
mind.
Yeah, I'll just don't worry. This isn't the full 38 minutes we're watching. His speech is over in just a couple minutes.
naming their children after the Prime Minister. And yet it has come to this,
God
as he
forbid.
interested in listening to the interests of our community. This is a tragic decay in our relationship from a leader that we welcomed into our houses and our hearts as he welcomed refugees and talked about sunnier ways. Members of our community were literally naming their children after the Prime Minister. And yet it has come to this, because of the decision of the Prime Minister to discard our global reputation as a humanitarian country and a peacemaking nation. As Canadian poet Mark Strand wrote, we have discarded dreams, preferring the heavy industry of each other. And we have welcomed grief and called the ruin impossible habit, a habit to break. And now here we are. When the leadership of this government refuses to take stances that support the life and liberty of its citizens, the leadership of this government loses the ability to raise the flag of sympathy later when the next Islamophobic attack inevitably occurs. We will continue to meet with our other elected officials and elected representatives today to advocate and engage in good faith. And we are here to remind our leaders that for Canadians, this is not emotion or anger or frustration. This is what we as a democracy do when our family members are killed here or abroad and our government does nothing. We'll always be there to engage in good faith to try to champion the cause of justice. As Canadian Muslims, we believe that this is the right thing to do for the tens of thousands of children of Gaza, for those lost to Islamophobia here in Canada, for all of them. Thank you.
Yeah, just really, really powerful stuff. And it's so nice to actually hear somebody call Justin Trudeau out on his performative politics. Because so many times we see Justin Trudeau shed a tear, kneel at a grave, do all this sort of stuff. But here's this person on this stage calling Justin Trudeau for what he is, like absolutely fake when it comes to actual real compassion towards the groups of people he panders to whenever an election happens.
Oh yeah, like I really want to make sure we have time before like the end of the hour. I'm not sure exactly when you end streaming, but like I want to make sure we have time for
Oh,
the
with you
next.
talking, this is going to be a long stream.
Oh no, but with unfortunately, like I believe me, you know I'd love to talk very long, but unfortunately with my obligations, I
Yeah.
need to maybe keep it to the top of the hour with like additional things I've talked about otherwise.
Mhm.
But I want to definitely talk about our next segment about
Mm.
Gen Z, if
Yeah.
you know what I mean,
Yeah,
right?
we'll
But
skip to that
yeah,
next.
cool. To put a capstone on this, like I lived through again a lot of Emma Vigland and I, who both worked at TYT at the same time, who are both similar in age and similar in political upbringing. Our political upbringing and awakening was kind of, living in America in very, conservative coded, but, socially liberal environments where we were starting to advance even beyond those confines. And from that foundation, did we make it, to progressivism, towards socialism, towards Marxism, to beyond. um I'm not trying to necessarily tie me and Emma Vigeland to an ideology. Wherever we go and wherever we agree or disagree, that's where we are. But I feel like those are similar paths we had, especially as like, both working at TYT at the same time and coming with similar generations. But I mean that all to say that we both have a lot of. Are you sipping? You were sipping your Majority Report mug earlier too, as I was saying that. That rocks. Sorry. But I mean, I say that all to say that as an American growing up in that time, I, speaking as myself, have a very particular memory and experience of the Obama administration. And I remember that, again, not necessarily knowing or stating that I know about a lot of what happened in Canadian politics, um, but that I've seen what it's like to, feel that air of superiority that, like, oh, it's okay. I have a president who's, or have a leader who's a nice guy and he's a soft guy and he cares about all these different things. And he'll always be looking out for the best interest because at the end of the day, he's a soft guy leader who cares about that stuff. And like, I had to put up with Drone King Obama and I have to put up with, appointing Citibank's laundry list of a cabinet Obama, and all these other, put up with oil fracking and expanding fossil fuels Obama, all these other different things that you know that I'm not going to belabor the point because again I know we have time, but Barack Obama has been this failure. I have seen people go through this. I hope that in Canada, where Sandy has told me a lot about the maple washing effect and a lot of other different things that allow Justin Trudeau and a lot of liberals like him and part of his coalition to get away with things like this, start to awaken and start to see from these moments and start to be radicalized by these moments in the right way and in the right guidance, which is why you should follow folks like Left of the Box. But to be radicalized to understand that these liberals will fail you. The conservatives hate you, the liberals will fail you. The conservatives hate you, the liberals will fail you. Understand that mantra in pretty much any country you have. And I don't mean to be reductive to what any other country is going through, but I found that to be very consistent in my, whatever I can stand on as being an expert in politics. And I see that very clearly in Canada. And I want people to be able to level up their political analysis in 2024 to do that.
Okay. So just so you have a little idea of scope of time left. So there's a Wikipedia page on the Quebec mosque shooting. People want to look that up. But I was going to read just a little bit from a Washington Post about this that leads into a little bit of a Tucker Carlson thing. And then it's the 2-minute video that I showed you about the Gen Z stuff, followed by the tweet thread. So is that good?
That should work.
That
That
should
should
work?
work.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, people can look this up on their own for the Quebec City mosque shooting. But the first little bit was it was an attack by a single gunman on the evening of January 29th, 2017 at the Islamic Cultural Center in Quebec City, a mosque in the Santa Foy neighborhood Quebec City, Canada. 6 worshippers were killed and 5 others seriously injured after evening prayers when the gunmen entered the prayer hall shortly before 8 p.m. and opened fire in just a couple minutes. So the thing is like when we talk about the hatred in the States and Trumpism and all that sort of stuff, it travels up here. So Quebec City mosque shooter scoured Twitter for Trump right-wing figures before the attack. And if we scroll down to...
Is this the? I'm sorry to bury the lead, but is this the guy who's been often connected to Ben Shapiro on the Daily Wire? Yes, there we go.
Yeah.
Dan knows Canada, baby.
So Bassinet also appears to have obsessively visited the Twitter accounts of Tucker Carlson and Laura Ingraham, Fox News personalities, David Duke, the former leader of the Ku Klux Klan, Alex Jones of InfoWars, conspiracy theories like Mike Cernovich, Mike piece of shit, Richard Spencer, and white nationalists, and senior White House advisor Kellyanne Conway. Bassinet checked on the Twitter
conclusion,
accounts.
delusion, spolution, diffusion, illusion, conclusion, splusion, collusion.
Yeah, so he checked in on the Twitter account of Ben Shapiro, the editor.
Number one rapper in America.
Yeah. Daily news site like 93 times in the month leading up to the shooting. So the reason why I want to bring this up is Tucker Carlson.
Sorry. I just want to like do you some justice a little bit because like I was interrupting a lot. But there's a separate sentence in between all of the stuff in between Twitter accounts of Twitter accounts of personalities like Tucker Carlson, Laura Ingraham, all the way down to Kellyanne Conway. But Bassinet checked in on the Twitter account of Ben Shapiro 93 times in the month leading up to the shooting.
Yeah.
On Power Report, we're going to talk about, because this is an issue low-key near and dear to my heart, about a person who, frankly went psychotic and beheaded someone they know who was a government employee in the United States and said that they were part of the deep state and, essentially, reacted they were acting like Trump, which mirrors so clearly so much else that I have to cover in the show that like I'm gonna go Rachel Maddow on the shits, right? Like I got a whole goddamn fucking documentary to give y'all, so make sure you're tuned into that. Not to be a shameless plug, but I mean like this stuff, like you're saying, absolutely connects, and it's really scary how it connects, to be honest.
The thing is that especially when it comes to Tucker Carlson and his influence right now up here is he was up in Alberta not too long ago, like just a little while ago, on some sort of speaking tour, the Sworn Enemy tour. This video has 1.3 million views. This is from the stage when he was talking in Alberta. And this is the type of stochastic terrorism that is going out there. Content warning. He says a lot of bigoted, horrible stuff in this. Not shocking. Right. I'll speed it up just a bit. Oh, I already have it there. Just an absolute piece of trash that hasn't gone away. And, he's already influenced a mass shooting that we know of in Canada. But, like, the beheading issue that you talked about.
He was sued so hard, Fox News had to let him go, like, for the record.
So we're not going to be listening to the whole thing. Just the first 6 minutes or so, just to again show he's still up to all of this stochastic terrorism and stuff that influenced that shooter.
What a great... Someone just gave me this t-shirt, which I just love so much, I'm actually going to wear it in the privacy of my own home. Al freaking Berta, baby. What a great province this is, what a great country this is. In fact, I was just be told, I've never said this to anyone, including my wife, but I know that in Canada it's official policy that coming out of the closet is good, unless you're the Prime Minister. But
I'm sorry, can I pause here because I honestly don't believe that this is like, phenomenal banter from Tucker Carlson, but this just confirms my, ignorant, but I just felt it in my gut theory that you can kind of vertically draw a line between everything that happens between America and Canada, and the fact that like the same sort of mindset of, yeah, oil, cosplaying, real,
Yeah.
rural, rustic, North America, Canada, United States is consistent with Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota, and then as you go up to Alberta, and then whatever the hell Americans don't have to care about that's above that. Like, I think that's like a constant thing within the effective Midwest of both countries, within the effective Central of both countries.
Yeah.
And I think it's disgusting that's being used in, like you adequately described, as a stochastic terrorism manner
Well, the
by Tucker
thing that
Carlson.
I'm
Not
wondering,
surprising, but sickening.
well, the thing I'm wondering about this speech too is some of the stuff he's saying. It's like we have hate speech laws in this country. Like I don't know how he was allowed to get away with some of the stuff that he said on stage. Like that right there is like a homophobic slur towards Justin Trudeau. Trying to say, "Oh yeah, coming out of the closet" type thing. Like just it gets worse.
So I'm going to reveal something about myself that I've never revealed, which is that I am part Canadian. And yes, I am.
I disown him. No, won't allow that.
I actually am part Canadian. And I was thinking this morning, I was like, I always say I'm the only American who's like legitimately interested in Canada, and I am. And I always have been. And I wonder, why am I so obsessed with Canada? And I thought, because I'm part Canadian. My great-grandfather, actually my father's family was in the colonies, and then they brought democracy, and they're like, we're out. We're going to Nova Scotia. And so they spent a couple hundred years there. The Rayfuses, they're still there, by the way. I think they're all liberals. But and then my great-grandfather's like, I'm going to try that again. So he comes to the United States, and I'm here as a result. So I feel it. In me is Canadian. And I've been all over your country, and I've been everywhere in your country. And I just think it's a remarkable place.
Sorry to bark at you, but like also in the effort of keeping things short, but like in America, he's known as the heir to a frozen food fortune, who's apparently like the son of a divorce situation with a very bohemian mother who may or may not have influenced his politics. Like that's how he's known, at least south of the 38, as they call it.
I don't think the average Canadian knows that much about him.
Well, I'm glad I'm here.
And I think people don't quite understand what Canada is because so much of it is bumped right up against our border. And I would argue, no offense, that the least impressive places in Canada are right up against our border. But once you get past that, it's just...
Keep in mind about 80% of the population is up against the border.
Which is the same coastal thing. Like most of the population of America is on the East Coast, but like literally on the coast. And then you have a large amount of the population on the West Coast, and then a sparse amount of the population in the middle, which is like, again, real estate developers don't want you to know this one easy trick to making property smaller, just to make property affordable out there. But feel free to continue.
Just unbelievable. I've been to this city a lot because of your mountains, which I just find beyond belief. Really, the prettiest places I've ever been. This country is the prettiest.
Your mountains, they're beautiful.
Second biggest country in the world, bigger than the United States, deeper oil reserves in the United States, more natural resources in the United States, and 1/9 the population. And when I hear the lunatics that run your government, like, our population's growing, we're so excited. I'm like, really? You want to live in a crowded country? 40 million people in the world's second.
I don't see the problem letting more people in. Gee,
again, America's got so much room, dog. Like, you don't even know. We are not untapping this potential. I mean, I hate to admit it to conservatives, but there's oil in America they haven't discovered because they haven't bothered to go to the really rural parts. I don't want them to ever go and discover that, but like, this is Saudi, like, again, North America is, and Mexico included. We're Saudi Arabia, dog. But I would rather us focus on green energy.
Biggest country? That sounds like the kind of place I want to live.
Also, sorry, last thing.
Like,
these are interesting things that someone like Tucker Carlson, is focusing on.
Yeah.
Because these are interesting priorities versus someone that, like, there are differences about Gen Z across gender, but generally Gen Z cares a lot more about the climate, and this is antithetical to all that. And this has been antithetical to all that for multiple generations.
You morons, but anyway. So I've come to Canada a lot, and every time I come, so many things.
That just sounded so disturbing.
Strike me. First and foremost, the natural beauty, the unbelievable natural beauty, prettier than Switzerland, in my opinion. And the second thing I notice is the politeness of the people. That's real. And the third thing I notice
Is
is
the
that
color
all the
of the
comedians
snow.
left decades ago. And it brings it out in me. And making fun of Canadians, and as I've already told you, and I hope it's obvious, is done with love. But I just can't control myself because no one will ever laugh at your joke. And so every time I go to Toronto, which I try not to do, but I do wind up there, every time I check in a hotel, I'm like, you guys have hot water? Like, where'd you get all the electricity? This is unbelievable. And they always have the same responses.
According to Pierre Poilievre, the electricity comes from lightning.
Yeah.
From all the lightning farms. Anyway.
Had electricity for a long time, eh? Like, no, it's a joke. You don't really have sled dog parking in front. I know that. No, we haven't had sled dogs in a long time, eh? And so, I just love that.
That's more just Canadians getting fed up with those American jokes.
I've told so many sled dog and Molson jokes, and I'll never stop. But one of the reasons I do it is because I do think it's important
But the S
to-
keeps going.
to laugh at your circumstances, not simply because it makes you feel better, though it does, but because it gives you perspective on them. And humor requires some distance, some critical distance, both from yourself and from your surroundings. And you can't really see things clearly until you have that. And so if you have a country where the funny people feel like they have to leave, that's a huge problem. And that's the first problem. The second problem is you can't really be effective as a political movement or a resistance movement, which effectively you are, if you don't laugh at your enemies. Because not only are they evil,
We laugh at them all the time.
and they're also ludicrous. They're ludicrous. And it's really important to say that because it saps their power immediately. Laughing at somebody, and if you're a married man, you know that, no, it's true. Your wife could come and hit you in the face with a 2x4, and that would be less painful than having her laugh derisively at you, particularly when you get out of the shower.
We're getting into the accidental therapy portion for Tucker Carlson of the evening.
Like, I'm sorry, has that happened to him? That his wife has laughed derisively after he's come out of the shower because of.
This is not a.
See, we're laughing at him right now, so we're disarming it as.
Yeah, I don't want to disarm him too much.
But it's like that's also like a tinge of male insecurity there. The whole idea of they'd rather be hit over the head with a 2x4 than have a woman laugh at their.
That would just end it for you. That would end it. Your male power would evaporate like a puddle on a hot day, like you'd be done. Because it has that effect. And so to look at your enemies, like let's say you had some sort of weird prime minister like to dress up
Not
in
if you have
fuzzy costume.
self-confidence. You.
Yeah. Well, then he goes to talk about Justin Trudeau dressing up as a furry. So
Weird prime minister like to dress up in fussy costumes. It would be super important to point that out a lot.
Wait, did that happen?
Like relentlessly. Somebody told me last night that
he is dressed up in costumes of the blackface kind.
his base, I was asked, we had this wonderful dinner last night with two of the most famous people in Canada, probably the two most famous people, Lord Black and my friend Dr. Jordan Peterson, and I asked, like, is there anyone in the country who supports this guy? He's so, I mean, I know him only, I've never met him, I only know him through television. I know his cousin Gavin Newsom pretty well, but I don't know him. Is there anyone who takes him seriously? And everyone in the room said, oh, yeah, young people, particularly young women, take him very seriously. They love him. And I thought, there's really only one way to combat that, and that's by pointing out what an absurd poser this guy is. He's like a ridiculous figure. Like, you should dislike and resist Justin Trudeau and his government to the maximum extent of your ability. But before you do that, you should just laugh at him until you can't breathe. Seriously. The guy's like, he's showing up for a costume party when no one else is. There's no costume party, and there's Justin Trudeau. Like, speaking as some sort of moral voice. Weird little cross-dresser. So anyway, that's my first piece of advice. My second piece of advice, once you've done that, which is very effective, and I know it's not the Canadian way because it's such a polite society that everyone feels morally bound to take everyone else's point of view very seriously and sort of nod gravely and pretend to consider their perspective.
And this is where we get into some of the really dangerous rhetoric.
But there are some perspectives that aren't in fact perspectives, they're attacks on you. And that's the main thing that I want to say in the short time allotted today, is that you should recognize what is happening to you. This is not a political debate to which you've been invited to participate. This is a destruction of you and your culture and your beliefs and your children and your future as a country.
Yeah.
I don't know how to express it any more clearly than that. Also, he said that he was like, "Oh, this is the short time that I'm allotted here. This is a 20-minute. This is a 20-minute banger. This is a
Oh,
21-minute,
it's
44
longer than
banger."
this. This is only part of it.
Oh, good lord! Wait. This says full speech. Are you serious?
Part of it is he was on stage longer than that.
Okay, he's on stage longer than you played, but like you're
Mhm.
playing from a clip that's a 21-minute speech,
Yeah.
and we're currently
So
like, yeah,
if you
6
go to
minutes
the
into it.
YouTube
So yeah,
page, you can see that this is part of the full speech.
that's horrifying. That's
Yeah.
absolutely horrifying.
But
And
here,
so like
yeah, here he
the,
is
the
on.
short amount of time he's able to say that like genocidal stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, here he is on stage in Alberta saying that us leftists are out to destroy their family, their children, their way of life. Like that is how you do stochastic terrorism 101. It's what helped led to the mosque shooting 7 years ago, and it's leading to other things across Canada and the United States, because we have here the news story that you're going to cover tomorrow. You were saying the man beheads federal employee father. Also, there's this story that I can't see anymore because it's no graphic content and I'm not putting my age into Twitter. It was basically somebody burned down a gender affirming clinic. And that's what this type of rhetoric leads to. It's just more and more attacks on marginalized groups, on the made up boogeymen that are destroying their way of life, but they don't understand that their way of life is it part of it is just going, like with climate change and all that sort of stuff, with the economy the way it is, they're not going to be able to hold on to it forever.
And it's really insidious because at the
Mhm.
same time the capitalists are making it less and less advantageous for people to get a college education, the same type of thing that would expose a lot of individuals, I think men, to give a precursor to the next segment, the ability to understand their materialistic, their materialist in a Marxist sense conditions. These men would be able to, and like a lot of people writ large, and a lot of these people who are calling for more conservative movements will be able to better identify the real enemies and to less identify trans people
Mhm.
or minorities as those enemies, or
Mhm.
as those folks who are wrongfully taking from them, because I don't think that's anything related to what's actually going on. And conservatives benefit from not giving people that material
Mhm.
analysis. But, again, as leftists, it is incumbent on us with the little bit of willpower that we have left. And let's, share the willpower and let's share the collective energy, because it's rough out here in these streets. And if 2024 goes some type of way, it's going to be much rougher for much longer years. So let's network with each other, let's connect, and let's make sure we're using this effort in the right way. But we have to deprogram people and give people the right context so that when they're looking at Israel Palestine, when they're looking at um people who are unhoused in North America, when they're looking at diasporic communities, and when they're looking at culture war issues being inflamed in all these different contexts, they're able to actually understand what's real and what's BS. But I think that leads a lot to what
Mhm.
we're talking about in this next video. So yeah, feel
Yeah.
free to take it.
So in the next video, we have a video followed by a Twitter thread where it's talking about the ideological divide growing among young men and women. And I would say not shocking for reasons of, well, we'll get into it in this talk, in this video. Um, let's go.
Report suggests there is a growing ideological divide between young men and women. And the report in the Financial Times found that women aged 18 to 30 are becoming far more.
Did you see that purple-haired woman? Sorry. Gotta throw that in there.
more liberal, while men in the same age group are developing more conservative views. This report looked at polling across several countries and determined the gap is widening rapidly among young adults and is dramatically more pronounced compared to older age groups. Now, for more on this trend, we're joined live by Alice Evans, a visiting fellow at Stanford University and one of the leading researchers on this topic. Now, Alice, thank you for joining us today. This is fascinating. It seems like a lot of this trend, this divide, dates back to the Me Too movement, but goes far beyond issues of gender.
Yeah, like not talking to anyone. It turns out that we'll refer to the binary here. Women like having freedom to make their own choices or their bodies and things of that sort. And that tends to somehow that's a political thing that leads them to be more progressive, whereas men feel like they're losing out on this sort of stuff. And they want to cling on to power and control much, much more. And you know, the world kind of sucks right now. And they're feeling it and want to blame someone.
Yes, definitely. It's associated. Young men in general, they tend to be more, across Europe and the US, they tend to be more skeptical of foreigners, more likely to vote for the far right, and also express what we call modern sexism. They feel that advances in women's rights come at men's expense.
It's fascinating. And as you mentioned, it trends over for the women as well. So talk to me about how women are not only fighting for the Me Too movement, women's issues, but also more open to some of the things that you mentioned there.
Absolutely. So what we see among young people in their 20s is that young women are becoming much more progressive, much more concerned about racial inequalities, for example, much more concerned about social injustice, but men are not going in the same direction. So for the first time ever, we see this ideological polarization between young women and young men.
What would you blame for the divide starting, and what's making things worse? Do we point the finger at social media, for example?
So I think there are 4 really excellent academic papers that shed light on what's going on. So there's a wonderful paper by Off, Sharon and Alexander. They look at modern sexism across Europe, and they find that young men are more likely to resent women's gains in places where there's been prolonged unemployment and where they also perceive where there's acute job competition and when they also think state institutions are unfair. And there's another very important academic paper on zero-sum mentalities, the belief that your gains come at my expense. And that kind of zero-sum thinking, which holds on both the left and the right, is associated with places and people who have experienced economic immobility. Like if you have economic stagnation, you're more likely to think the pie is very small, and if they're grabbing it, there's less for me. So those are the big economic drivers, and that seems to be encouraging it amongst the youth because it's young people who've seen less economic immobility compared to their parents. And so this is really important. So it's not that all young men are becoming more right-wing. It's particularly young men who are perhaps less educated, who are falling behind and seeing women taking their place. Rich, successful men are perfectly fine. You know, rich, successful men are often very liberal and voting for democratic parties because their status is secure. So if men care about status and they're doing well in the labor market, they can still vote left-wing. Then a second important factor beyond the economics is social media filter bubbles. So people are spending more time online and they're in these filter bubbles, which are reinforcing their priors, giving them, making them feel self-righteous. So rather than saying, hey, you're a bit of a loser if you can't get a date, people are saying, it's women's fault for being graspy and greedy, for example. And then so filter bubbles are really important because if you're trapped in that group think, everyone is telling you you're right and you just take it for granted. So filter bubbles are really important. And corporate algorithms, they want to keep people hooked, and they do that by reinforcing their priors. And a third really important factor is cultural entrepreneurs. People like Andrew Tate, rich, successful guys can charismatically sell the story that, it's women, men should dominate women and that's how women should behave. So it's these 3 really important factors: the economic resentment, the social media filter bubbles, and also that cultural entrepreneurship.
Well, this is having widespread side effects. It's impacting a lot of things, not just here in North America, but around the world as well. So walk us through some of those impacts: birth rate, marriage rates, things of that nature.
Right, absolutely. So a really fascinating case is South Korea, where it has the largest gender pay gap in the OECD. And for a long time, men have dominated companies, and female graduates are treated like servile underlings, expected to serve the tea or run errands. And for a long time, women have been abused. And, there are various spy cams, and men have total impunity for harassment and assault. And for a long time, women have been so silent and ashamed that they haven't done anything about it because it's so humiliating. But now there's a massive feminist movement right in South Korea. Women are becoming much more emboldened and speaking out, and they're having none of it. And so what we're seeing is that this is also affecting birth rates, because if women see men as repulsive and don't want to have anything to do with them, then more young women in South Korea, in Hong Kong, in Taiwan, they don't want to marry these guys, and they're choosing to stay single, and they don't want to mother. So that's it's not a full explanation of falling fertility, but it's certainly contributing to the big fall in fertility, the big fall in marriage.
Well, clearly widespread, hopefully some action on that sooner rather than later. Alice Evans, a visiting fellow at Stanford University, leader
Okay.
Yeah.
So, like, one thing I do want to mention here is that, I want to be a positive space for men. And a lot of this is like, you see women say men aren't good enough anymore. This is why men aren't getting attention. This is why men are having troubles with relationships. And yet, where are they getting the help to actually be better people, to improve on this? Because a lot of their role models, their influences are horrible people that are just trying to keep them back in the past where they didn't have to worry about improving themselves in order to get a mate because women had very limited choices back then. And so there hasn't been enough, like in culture and media, to really help men learn how to have healthy relationships and how to work on themselves and how to be happy, maybe just being happy with themselves. But so that kind of leads into this tweet thread that I found. So it goes down a couple layers. So this person responding saying, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Women historically recent acquisition of financial rights has led to straight men collectively reeling from the culture shock for the first time in history, having to actually be likable to get a wife. And that's the thing, like a lot of women just want to mock men because of this, as opposed to actually trying to help them be better versions of themselves type thing. So where do we go from here? It's simple. Yeah. Women won't date me because I'm conservative. That's a great reason, is what she's saying there. But it goes into this tweet thread here. It shows a bunch of graphs and interesting stuff. So, new ideological divide is emerging between young men and women in many countries around the world. I think this is one of the most important social trends unfolding today and provides the answer to several puzzles. And it's just showing a graph showing the divide. We're often told Gen Z is hyper progressive, but other surveys suggest they're surprisingly conservative. But breaking things down by sex provides an explanation. Young women are very progressive, young men are surprisingly conservative. Gen Z is 2 generations, not one. And in country after country, surveys show a very similar pattern. Historically, the views of men and women in the same generation have been very similar. I don't think so. I think this is just the first time women are allowed to really express it. Yeah, there was a long time before where women had to vote the same as their husband if they were allowed to vote at all. So I think part of this is the whole left-handed graph thing, where we're seeing women actually able to express themselves, and it's skyrocketing because for the first time we have that freedom on this side. So this is still true for older age groups, but gap has opened between today's young men and women. Look at some examples. Here in South Korea, the divide between men and women is famously wide. Young women have become markedly more progressive on gender norms, but young men have not budged. The result, emergency societal rift. This having huge impacts, including reducing rates of marriage, births in Korea, whose birth rate has plummeted to become the lowest of any country in the world. This has been written about in detail, but it's not just Korea. Here's a striking one for the US. In contrast to the typical relationship between values and age, young American men hold more conservative views on gender than older men. This has huge societal implications. Feel free to pause me whenever if you want to jump in with something, or we'll just save it all for the end.
No. Yeah, I was thinking of just saving it all for the. Oh,
okay, yeah.
I am unmuted. Yeah, just saving it all for the end, just because, like, I think for the show portion, if we end within like the next 5-7 minutes, that would make sense.
Yeah. And here's where it gets most interesting. The divide is not just about issues concerning gender. This UK chart is remarkable. All age groups, all groups of people, young and old, men and women, have become more liberal on race, immigration, except young men. And here's Germany on similar issue. Young German women have become markedly more progressive in attitudes to immigrants, while young German men are more conservative on this than their elders. In Poland's election last year, okay, just more. What is causing all of this? One theory is negative polarization. In the wake of Me Too movement, young women have both become progressive and more vocal about their views. Many young men feel threatened and have reacted by taking the opposite position. this could
Okay, wait,
expose.
sorry. Can I just so I want to jump in here just because I see some similarities between the video you played
Mhm.
where John Byrne Murdoch, who's a writer for the Financial Times, which as far as financial publications go, is not all that bad. And I guess I can slightly recommend, at least for their free stuff, so you're not actually giving them money. And the author that he recommends, the scholar who I forget her first name because I'm a noted sexist, but I know her last name is Evans because I'm a noted sexist. I know that's my last name. I'm willing to say that's no relation. All right.
Mhm.
But no, she laid out really quickly that there's like a three, like a trifecta thing that's going on here. Um, and before you qualify numbers to how much of this thing is, or you try to apply as like a 33%, 33%, 33%, let me just walk through it. It's partially economics because men, especially college undereducated men, as load as that term is, feel that women are getting advances ahead of them, especially at the same time you're seeing women get more advanced degrees at for the first time in history at a higher level than men were. And then you're seeing a social thing where, through the Me Too movement, kind of like you're mentioning here, that a lot of men who don't really remember or weren't really alive during a time, or weren't really conscious during a time before a lot of the Me Too stuff was happening, only see it as like a zero sum gain between what women are, actually in reality. you know we're talking about this in an unfortunately very binary context, but for the sake of brevity here, please. Um, we're Women are in reality trying to make back gains that they had lost, much in the same way that in America, Black folks are trying to make back gains, and Latino folks are trying to make back gains that have been lost through systemic discrimination by systems that exist in these capitalist countries. And so there's the economic aspect that I just mentioned, there's the social aspect that I just mentioned, and then there's the media aspect that was mentioned again brilliantly in the interview that you just had, that goes towards the Andrew Tates, the Ben Shapiros, which kind of sums across a lot of what you've like kind of brilliantly put together in this show here, is how media, a lot of the stuff, we're consuming it kind of to get through our day. For some of it to get some information on what's going on. For some of it as like a thing to put on the background. For some of it as a coping mechanism because we have friends and good relationships with these people we see on screen that may contrast heavily to the relationships that we have in real life. That all has to be respected when you're in this kind of game, right? But when you're in this kind of game, there's a lot of different incentives and there's a lot of those, different factors of relationships being played upon. And a lot of men get reached in those super vulnerable positions, and they unfortunately fall down these rabbit holes where, they could be more overtly political rabbit holes where they're certainly starting to believe into more conservative things that not only go against, in this gender paradigm that this study has done, against women's rights and women's equality, but are things that go against human rights and human equality more broadly. And there's things that are just, more pro business, more corporate, less of, you know, freedom for more and more people. And then you get to these I mean, like, just, broadly speaking, you have these factions who are reaching out to these really vulnerable male audiences who, I think, to what you're getting at, unfortunately on the left, don't have enough, not saying there aren't out there, but don't have enough solidified counter programming to be able to say, hey, look, there's a better way to live out there. There's a, healthier way to live, not just better, but just objectively healthier way to live than just rejecting this junk food style content you're receiving. Throw in some vegetables in there, and if you learn how to season them properly, you'll understand the vegetables taste better than the chips. They taste better than the soda, right? And I think this is a process of teaching a lot of young folks there. I also think that there's, to be slightly optimistic, maybe we're at a time where with the internet and with how much media we have, we're able to pull under 18-year-olds and people we traditionally didn't think of as being smart enough to vote and hold political opinions for their dumbass opinions. And I remember having dumbass opinions that thankfully no one came and asked me and my like boy group friend in high school and middle school about. Thanks God, because they would have been some pretty dumbass opinions. Probably, again, not necessarily me, but also necessarily me, substantially worse than what you're hearing from a lot of these social media actors right now. So I think maturity comes a lot with this. Let's allow people to mature, but let's also create roots for folks to mature in ways that allow them to be more open-minded people.
Yeah, like so many times I've seen men try to talk, come out with things and issues that they have, only to be mocked and laughed at or told to go away by people on the left. Because a lot of women are fed up with certain topics, but then who's left to teach them? Who's left to help them, guide them through a lot of this confusion that they're facing? And sometimes it feels like the left can be quite hostile to men, especially men who are socially awkward, who haven't figured things out, who've only been exposed to Andrew Tate type people. And we don't seem to have the same, like, we don't have a leftist Andrew Tate. We don't have a role model on the left for men that's really, popular.
You have burgeoning individuals. I
Mm.
think, for better or worse, Hassan sits in this world. I think Vosh and Destiny kind of sit in this world as like, particularly manly people. And, like I again, based on my trolls in my comment section, maybe I'm not perceived as the most like cisgender male person, but I am. And, I try to express how I am as a version of, you know, all of the experiences, the intersectionalities that make up Dan from the internet in maybe a way that a younger Dan from the internet may not have seen represented in media, that a current Dan from the internet also doesn't see necessarily represented in media. And so I think I want to do that, and I respect other folks who want to do that in that type of way. And I think that there's an audience for that just by how weird algorithms work. But yeah, it's this desirability that has been pushed by people with bravado, just like, debate lord culture was largely pushed by bravado. And, much like I'm a lot on tech YouTube, I'm a lot on car YouTube, certain tech brands like Apple or certain car brands like Bugatti always get the attention compared to like, hey, yo, I know Bugatti made like, a really sick car that's like pushing the limits of technology, or Ferrari, whatever. But this Kia over here is actually kind of good, right? Like, you have those situations where every once in a while stuff gets surprised. And so whether it's politics, whether it's cars, whether it's tech, I think, don't allow and again, when I was talking about earlier about how you're dissecting information, be the type of person who is just aware of how media is made to affect you. And then at that point, hopefully you're able to kind of get ahead of it and be a little bit smarter about it and not become I'm trying not to use a loaded phrase for this, but like, not succumb so quickly to what the algorithms want you to believe, because those algorithms are making money not off of you being a better person and not being off of you being a better community member and not being off of you being more informed, but off of you getting more sucked into the drama.
Yeah. Well, don't tell him I said this, but Jeff Wiggins, I think, is a phenomenal role model for men.
I agree. I think
Absolutely
that's a great
phenomenal.
example. And I'm sorry that I lapsed in judgment for that. I think
No,
Jeff Wiggins, so I highly
No, like
suggest
on the
folks check out
left,
and subscribe as well
like
too.
he doesn't have the big platform, that's all right now. But I
He's
think,
very much growing. Yes.
yeah, I think he's an absolute phenomenal role model for men.
Co-host on Power Report also, I will say.
So let's just finish up this very interesting Twitter thread. This could explain how the divide on gender issues bleeds into other spaces. If some young men think young women are woke and I am not, I know it's an annoying word, they will instinctively take non-woke positions on other topics. A complementary theory is that these trends are explained by young men and women increasingly inhabiting different spaces. So much of daily life now plays out online, and young men and women are in different parts of the internet, algorithmically walled gardens of TikTok. And this means different, in some cases diametrically opposed, cultures and ideologies that can take off quite quickly, and soon you have two halves of a generation who find each other's views incomprehensible at best, intolerable at worst. The problem is these theories suggest the divergence will continue both for today's young adults and future generations. Teenagers are growing up in these same ideological bubbles, hence the popularity of Andrew Tate, etc., which is unfathomable to people outside of the bubble. And it's worth coming back to the original chart. This trend can not be palmed off as sole responsibility of one gender. Young women and young men have both played their part in the divergence. Korea is an extreme situation, but it serves as a warning to other countries what can happen when young men and women part ways. Its society is riven in two. Its marriage rates plummets. Its birth rates. Okay, for personally, marriage is overrated. And no, not everyone needs kids. Have fallen precipitously to become the lowest in the world. Where do we go from here? It's hard to say. One thing that would help is desegregating online spaces. If top influencers spoke to both sexes instead of just one, that could begin bridging the divide. Will this happen? Almost certainly not. But I think it's true that bridging the gap will have to come more from men than women. But I think diagnoses of toxic masculinity only exacerbate the problem, causing further negative polarization. Young men need better role models, but it's not their fault they don't have them. Lots to ponder. What you think? And one more thought: it would be easy to say all this phase will pass, but the ideology gaps are only growing. And data shows people's formative political experiences are hard to shake off. People's political and ideological views at age 30 prove really sticky. And I think was
Right, like
there.
there's a shout out there too. I think it was Alice Evans. I didn't know whether it was Alex or
Yeah, Alice
there,
Evans.
but
First to Alice Evans, whose mountains of work in this space were invaluable for my research. You can read her many excellent articles at that link.
yeah, I'd say even beyond the journalists who, to
Mhm,
some extent, will always be trying to like add some opinion or slant to it. Check out the experts, check out the
mhm,
researchers, check out like those folks. But yeah, no, I think that's like it's really good stuff, and there's a lot of take this information with the context. There's a lot of disinformation and misinformation by media outlets, by mainstream media outlets.
mhm,
You might even see by the Financial Times, where this article, kind of originated from. That's trying to say like, oh, Gen Z is conservative, Gen Alpha is liberal. There's context. There's always something deeper to the story. And I think like, even this Twitter thread, which is just a summation of a larger article, which is just a summation of a larger research paper, which is just a summation of a constantly evolving body of work. This is the stuff where like when there's nuance to be said that can't be matched in just a Twitter thread or just like a Twitter thing, this is what
mhm.
professionals mean when they're talking about that. So trust them when they're telling you to look into the details, and when they're citing, not just to look into the details because that can be a misnomer as well, but when they're citing folks like this who at every turn and every stretch of the imagination are about what they're supposed to be about.
Mhm. Yeah, I think I just wanted to get to this part here. So this person saying, so perhaps, well, I am certainly persuadable by the idea that we may be entering a period where certain progressive shifts are susceptible to being reversed. For example, affirmative action has been repealed in the U.S., and unlike Roe v. Wade, that has not been met with uproar. So perhaps the gap here will be closed by both sides meeting in the middle. That would be very good. No, it would not. Almost certainly a better solution, cohesion, than one side doing all the legwork. Time will tell. Yeah, so let's just switch. Let's just get to me and you on the screen. People are going to see this. I'm sorry, but I don't want to switch to the other. Just bear with me. There we go. And then Dan disappears.
Sorry.
Because he's basically saying that men are going to have to do a lot more of the work in order to close this gap, which is true. But he's like, maybe women should, go the other way too. And it's like, no, 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 no. We do not need to meet in the center of this one because this is like basically a lot of this is coming from the first time women have freedom, that they don't have to get into relationships, they don't have to get married. And then they realize that since they don't have to, they don't want to with the type of men that are out there. But we have cultural influence, societal influences. In media, little girls are constantly told about getting into relationships and how to do that and how to date properly and all this sort of stuff. Men do not have that. If they go by anything, it's probably those rom-coms out there, which are just the most toxic thing possible.
I mean, yeah, that's where I would kind of differ, is that, like, I
Mhm.
think men have that out there, but I think what men are told are the
Mhm.
most, affirming of toxic masculinity type things.
Mhm.
I don't think men are watching a lot of rom-coms. I think men are watching a lot of content where
Mhm.
they are told explicitly that you should just jump and try to kiss the girl that you may or may not know is into you. Where in, like, the real world, that's sexual harassment. Where in, like, the media world, that's like the crescendo of the movie. And I think, like, that's something that, as an adaptation of these things with Me Too, needs to be more adapted at. And, like, outside of even social media, I think these conversations are, algorithmically driven towards rage. And I think on the one, I won't make any sort of stance on which gender falls for rage bait more, because I think different, I think both genders fall for rage bait pretty easily. And I'm like, I haven't seen a study on that, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was pretty straight and narrow across the board. But I think something that balances the way forward is something that balances and, emphasizes the plight that has been wrought across folks who are not men, which includes women and people who don't fit in that, like, non-binary spectrum, but also, reconciles the modern realities of the economics and the social structures and the social dynamics and the social hierarchies of modern men and modern women and modern gender nonconforming people. And I think one of the better ways to grease the skids around that is a Marxist and a socialist analysis. But that's a lot of what I've got to say. I've got to head out.
Yeah,
Like, I'm so sorry. I really
that's
wanted to
okay.
stay longer, but I have to head out, like,
Yeah.
right now. But it's been a great pleasure joining with
Mhm.
you. Uh Sandy is often
Mhm.
the guest on Power Report, youtube.com/Dan for the internet. So you can check her out there sometimes, but obviously check her out here on her channel, youtube.com/LeftoftheBox most
Yeah.
often. And yeah, you know where to find me. You know where to find Sandy.
Yeah.
I know where to find most of y'all in chat. I appreciate seeing you. I'm sorry to get to respond most of the comments, but yes, I overextended. I definitely overextended myself today, so I
That's okay.
apologize.
That's okay. No, it's great having you on, and we'll have to talk again later.
Absolutely. Peace.
Bye. Hello. I am back on. Yeah, so that was wonderful chats with Dan from the internet. All of his stuff is linked below. You can go check him out. His Power Report is tomorrow. Usually starts around 9:30 Eastern. But yeah, I haven't been responding to the chat much because I get distracted when I'm talking to other people on here. So it's a little bit of a give and take. So let's oh, I can take these out right now. They hurt my ears. um I can start going back into the chat and talking a little bit more to you guys because you guys make my show and you guys rock. And I love that you come out to see my content. Really appreciate it. So I'm going to scroll way up. Let's see. And yeah, I don't get to scroll way up. And I'll try to find comments where I actually know the context and aren't part of a conversation. Because I really do love interacting with you guys. Hmm. Let's see, let's see. Da, 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 da. Bad lefty analysis like this means Dan is in the top 5 Power Report hosts. Yeah, he's definitely in the top 5. uh, Let's see. Chrissy said it sucks that speaking on reality sounds like doomerism right now. Yeah, it can be hard listening to things, but I'm always under the belief that you can't change the system unless you know what's broken in it, unless you acknowledge what's broken in it. And from there, it's like it might hurt, but at least then you can start mending the wounds. But if people keep on turning a blind eye to what's going on, then the problems will never be solved. But that's where community comes in really handy, where we have each other's back, where we support each other, where we help each other through these difficult times and let people know that they're not alone, that, they're not fighting these battles on their own. We're all in this together. And, I do believe ultimately in the end, progressivism, leftism, open-mindedness, science, all of that, I do believe that will win out. It's just we're in the end throes of dying capitalism and old systems that were used to prop up few powerful people. And that system is no longer being propped up. It's no longer stable. And they're going to grasp onto it as hard as they can before it finally goes away. So it's kind of like, a storm before the calm. Grand Theft Autobot. Jesus, Canadian Trump supporters. Yep, we've got lots of those up here. Go to any right-wing rally and you'll see Trump 2024 flags up here in Canada, or Trump for Prime Minister, or Trump for President of Canada, which isn't a thing. But yeah, we have lots of Trump supporters up here. It's sad. Lefty, build a wall. Yeah, a lot of Canadians would like to keep Americans out. We'll build that wall, keep Americans out. Grand Theft Autobot, for real, damn, we need to focus on clean energy and get off all our dependence on oil. Yeah, that's part of the problem with Alberta, is it's actually in their culture, like oil production, work in the oil fields and stuff. It is like ingrained in who they are as people. It's part of their identity. And that's part of the reason why it's so difficult for them to think of anything other than that. But it's one of the things, like, it's going to go away at some point, and instead of helping them prepare for it and mentally get over that hurdle and help them prepare, the conservatives, the right wing, are telling them to cling on to it even harder, even though it's going away. They don't have a choice in it. It's going away. Climate change is going to get too extreme at some point, and something I say is that we can choose to make change now, or change will be done to us later. And the conservatives and right wing are trying to keep it so that it's going to be done to them later, hoping that at some point they'll have more control over it. But at some point you won't have control over that change anymore. So it's important that while we have the ability to influence that change, that we do everything we can to help that change go in a positive direction. Grand Theft Autobot, they're laughing when he makes fun of Canadians saying "eh" all the time. What a jackass. Yeah. he was upset from the sounds of it that when he makes his jokes about Canada to Canadians that they're saying, "Oh no, we haven't had sled dogs in a while," thinking that they're not getting that he's joking. And part of it is, okay, a lot of Americans might be saying that seriously, and a lot of Canadians might be answering very sarcastically. So we tend to have a lot more sarcastic humor here and be like, "Oh, sure, sure, whatever you say, whatever you say. Nope, nope, we'll just answer this in the most autistic way possible." Yes, we have power up here. Monope, oh, I'm sorry. Did he use an anecdote of a wife laughing derisively at her husband when he gets out of the shower? Yeah, that's something Tucker Carlson said on stage while it was being recorded. That men would rather be hit in the face with a 2x4 than be laughed at derisively by their wives, especially when they come out of the shower. Yeah, that's the big influencer on the right. Yeah, that's the guy. That's the man. Your male power would evaporate like a puddle on a hot day. Yeah, yeah, yeah. All male power is tied to their penis. Let's see. Mm. Grand Theft Autobot, really young men are conservative. That's disparaging. Yeah, and they were touching on it in the thread and in the video. Is that, part of it is the economy. It is just tanking. And a lot of the things that men are told that make them men, being the breadwinner, being, having the good paying jobs and things of that sort, those good paying jobs simply aren't available anymore. It's impossible to be a single breadwinner anymore. And so they're constantly, in a way, being told more and more and more that they're no longer men. And one of the ways that they can, the right wing, the influencers can steal the focus away from the actual problems is say, well, it's because you're now competing with women for your jobs, as opposed to saying, no, the economy is really what's causing it. The capitalist system is really what's causing it. But it's much more easy and convenient for the right wing to be like, nah, it's the woman. You have to compete with the woman. And so men are now feeling like not only do they have to compete with other men in order to get women, well, now they have to compete with women in order to appeal to women, by having those good paying jobs, by being the breadwinner. But they're having to compete with women now, which just is horrible, because how are they supposed to win over a woman if they're capable of doing their own jobs, of making money? Because a lot of men are taught that's where their value is being that breadwinner, is being that macho man. Whereas men are valuable in so many ways that aren't tied to finances. Like, men rock. You guys really do. Like, men are wonderful, wonderful people. And the more you're allowed to express that, the better you'll be, the healthier you'll be. And it's kind of like there are no traits that are specifically designed for women, and there's no traits specifically that are for men. And then there's people like me who are non-binary. That like to take on both things that are traditionally or more commonly seen in one gender than the other. But you can have nurturing men, and you can have, you know, warrior type women, like brave women. You can have a mix, and that's okay, because, I don't need a man in my life to be a breadwinner. I need him to be a companion, to be a friend, to be somebody I can talk to, somebody that can be a sounding board to guide me through when I'm feeling a little bit lost, but somebody I can also be there for. Somebody that, we can spend time with and laugh together and share experiences with. And none of that is tied to toxic masculine traits that those on the right demand of men. And it's actually, I feel, would be really freeing if men really figured this out. But of course, the right doesn't want men to do that, because then all of their relevance would go away. They wouldn't be able to be the influences they are. They wouldn't be able to make the money that they're doing without that kind of control over men and their masculinity, other men's masculinity. I disproved something in real time? Says Philip Augusta. I'm not sure. Hmm. Da, 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 da. Yes, Sammy Cedar is also a very good role model for men. Well, I wouldn't necessarily say he's a good role model for men in the traditional sense, because he can still be very standoffish. Like, it's not a position he would necessarily want. Like, it feels like he doesn't necessarily want to embrace it so much, but accepts it as something he is. Uh, like he just presents himself the way he is and says, but it doesn't feel like at times that he's actively trying to reach out, even though he is, like, the way he talks, the way he presents himself, he is a fantastic role model. And if you know, I would love to see more men kind of follow after him and be more like him, open-minded, compassionate, that sort of thing. Because, like, to me, a lot of people would say Sam is not very masculine, but to me, I see him as being very masculine and expressive in who he is. And it would benefit a lot more men to see that without feeling the need to mock it. You know, without feeling this need to mock the metrosexual type thing. And but yeah, I still think Jeff Wiggins, just, he's a phenomenal role model for men, and he strikes me as the type that, you know, actively wants to engage with that audience as well and can handle it. And I think it would be great if he could get a bigger platform so that he could do just that. Oops. Jump down. Where was it? There we go. Oh, yes, the letter hack has probably already been on for a while. Oh, no. That's why I try to keep these around 2 hours, but Dan has a way of talking, but he says such great stuff. Like, he always has amazing analysis. Yeah, Dan is a good role model for lefty analysis type people. Bad lefty. Fax. Sandy. Yeah. Yeah. You want to fax me? FAX? You want to fax me? Yeah, I don't have a fax machine. Won't be able to receive anything. Hmm. Oh, Philip B. Gus is saying younger men were still more progressive than older men, but then you immediately cited the German poll. Yeah, I think where your perception is coming from is that those younger men who were left leaning, who were more progressive, are even more so than previous generations. But the divide is breaking up. It's one of my friends was also saying, like, it's similar when it comes to people's views on trans folks. She's a trans woman. And she's saying that the gap is actually narrowing, but of the people who like accept trans people and that sort of thing. And that actually, like, the largest part of the population just doesn't care. Like, it's just, whatever, live your life, whatever. But the reason why it's feeling a lot more polarized now is because those on the right wing who already disliked trans folks dislikes them even more, like way more. Like that rage is just starting to bubble over and get even stronger. And they're starting to lash out and stuff. And so there are, because again, these are just polls. It's not saying every young man. So there's already a lot of young men who are left and progressive. And those young men, I imagine, are far more left and progressive than the older generations. However, we do have this issue where there's a lot more men going into the right wing because of issues that we've already talked about with the economy and being laughed at and mocked a lot of the time by, people on the left, unfortunately. It happens. I see articles on it, men upset that they have to work on getting dates or something like that. You'll see a tweet around that. Or men realizing that they have to, work on improving themselves. And then you see the replies to those tweets, and it's a lot of people mocking the men, like, haha, yeah, it's about time, and all this sort of stuff. But they totally forget the fact that nobody is teaching these men how to be better, how to date, how to present themselves better, how to appeal to women. People on the left aren't doing that. They're just kind of assuming that they should know somehow. And so when men seek out that information, they end up going to the people who are presenting it, which are the right-wing influencers, saying, this is how you get that woman. This is how you get into a relationship. This is how you be a man. And yeah, so we definitely need more people on the left willing to accept men. And it means a lot of the times you have to be willing to answer the worst questions. I'm the type of person, if something is asked to me in good faith, no matter how bizarre, no matter how obvious it is, I'll answer it because you don't know until you know. And I come from a background of being very socially awkward and being socially isolated, and I had a lot of missteps when I started to get into groups of friends and things that seemed to be obvious to everyone weren't obvious to me because I simply didn't know. And there's a lot of men in that category of certain learned behaviors that they have where they simply don't know, even though it might seem obvious to women, to people on the left, like that behavior is totally inappropriate. But nobody has actually ever told them that before or explained why. And so if a man were to ask me, like, I'm not talking about personal questions to me, like general questions, and it's done in good faith, and I'm going to answer it to the best of my ability. Because you don't know until you know. And we need more people willing to have the patience to talk men through some of these conflicting social messages that they're getting from media. Because a lot of them are conflicting as to how best to interact with people. Let's see. Oh, so it looks like Letter Hack and No Commitment Chick is also live. Lots of live people. This is why I'm going for the 6 p.m. time slot. I'm only competing with TYT at that time. Well, I'm down to the bottom of the chat. Bad Lefty, two people can ask me very same question and get two very different responses based on whether they think they asked in good faith. Yeah. And part of that is, like, for me, learning personally, like, I want to be able to ask certain questions without feeling like I have to be ashamed of asking questions. Because, yeah, you don't know until you know. And if people are ashamed for asking the question to begin with, then they're going to shy away and not even bother asking that question. But also, I used to tutor English to newcomers in these conversation circles. And so these newcomers were immigrants or students, so they already had like a working understanding of English, but the slang, the idioms, the flow was what they were working on. And I was one of the younger volunteers, and as soon as they realized I would answer any of their questions, honestly, I got a lot of questions that the older volunteers were not comfortable answering. But it's the thing, like, they're learning the language. They need to know these things. You can't shy away from talking about them if this is something that they want to know. Like, one of the first things they would ask me is, what is the racial slurs for them? And I was a little naive, but I don't know that many. It would be more like, you tell me what you heard and I'll be able to tell you if that was a slur. But it's important to be open and not shy away from answering honestly when they ask you these questions. And that goes for men just trying to figure out relationships. Because, like, they're constantly being told, you need to learn to be better. You need to do this. You need to, stop doing this, stop doing that, stop. But nobody's telling them the right way to do it or a better way of doing it. Let's see. So, yeah, I was mentioning at the beginning of the stream, I took Frodo back to the vet yesterday for just more like regular checkups, but he also has to get subdermal fluids now occasionally. Like, I'm at least able to get him into the non-for-profit vet, so it's a lot cheaper than the vet that I have been taking him in. But the multiple trips are starting to add up. So any help with him, it's only for a little while longer, because the vet yesterday could feel a mass on his abdomen growing. He doesn't have much longer, so I'm just trying to keep him as comfortable as possible until the end. But, besides his struggling to get him to eat and drink, he seems okay. He plays with his brothers. He walks around. He's still very affectionate. Yesterday, before I took him to the vet, he was actually on my lap with Lanier, which was just a perfect moment that I wish I could have kept forever. I tried getting a picture of it, but I couldn't quite get the angle of the camera right. To see their two butts touching each other, one orange, one black, which was just so cute. But like, he seems okay right now, but he doesn't have, between the kidney disease and the mass on his abdomen, I'm trying to prepare myself for what is going to be happening. But any help I can get covering these vet bills. He has to be on kidney food until the end now. But, he doesn't have until the end of the year. He just doesn't. So I'm just going to do what it takes to keep him as happy and comfortable until then. So yeah, any help with that is greatly appreciated. Also, it would help if, let's see, people are buying my art. I'm still looking to sell some portraits. I have one portrait that I'm going to be able to show you guys very soon. It was the portrait done for the person living with poverty at no cost to them, in honor of the $500 donation I received from someone towards Frodo's vet bills. Somebody who was a complete stranger to me donated over $500 for his vet bills. So that portrait is done. It's currently getting scanned at the art studio, so I have my own copy. And once the person who this portrait is for sees it, then I'll be able to post it online because they see my content, they follow me, so then they would see it, and I don't want to spoil the surprise, and I want to see their reaction to it. So I'm looking forward to that, and I'm starting on my next portrait because one of my goals this year is to just do a lot more art. It really does help me in a lot of ways. So I'm also looking, hopefully, to get more people to just, sign up to become a patron. That helps, but only if you have the money. Don't worry about it if you don't. Also, in the description box below, I have an Amazon wish list. Any help from there, like, even something as simple as a bag of M&Ms. Just helps to brighten my day, and it's a treat that I get that I wouldn't necessarily be able to afford anymore, because groceries are just becoming stupendously expensive. But any help from there is great because, like, I'll show you something. I'll show you guys something to really show how important some of this stuff is. So a very generous person got the box lights, the soft box lights from my studio. And thanks to him, you get to see me in this light. Without it, this is what you'd be seeing. Because this is just the ring light that I have, which just does a horrible, horrible job of lighting me. But this does a much better job. So I can record videos at any time of the day. So something as simple as that makes a big difference. Like a second webcam would make a big difference, because then I'd be able to bring on other people a lot easier, because a lot of the video sharing programs can't use the same camera that you're using for the OBS at the same time. So to have one camera for that, one camera for the OBS would help a lot. Things like that. Also in the description box below, you have the links to Dan stuff. You also have the link if you want to help with, if you can help with Frodo's vet bills. There's the PayPal link. If you're Canadian, you can send an e-transfer to SandeeLovas@gmail.com. Every little bit helps. It's going to be a continue added big expense until he goes at this point. But he's the one thing that I can remember in pretty much my entire life that I'm at peace going into debt for him. Going into debt has been a like triggering event for me before. Going into debt could be very detrimental to my mental health, but this is the first time I'm at peace with it. Going into debt for him, because he's my world. So hopefully he stays very healthy until the end. Happy and healthy until the end. That's what I'm hoping. But yeah, let's see. Thank you everyone to coming out. Thank you to the wonderful mods in the chat. Can't do this without you, because as you can see, I get distracted, so I wouldn't be able to keep the sandbox clean of turds if it weren't for you guys. Let's see. Any other? Yep, Dan show power reports on tomorrow. And see it then. Let's see if I can get a cat in here before we leave. We started off with Abernathy. Let's see. Lanier. Abernathy. Frodo. Sometimes they'll come. They know their names. They do know their names. Abernathy. Lanier. Babies. Lanier. Or they're all just sleeping on the bed together. Are they come? No, they'll come as soon as I turn off the camera. Lanier. Oh, there's an Abernathy. Let me pages. Get this. Come on. Here we go. There we go. Oh, he's such a beautiful kitty. There we go. There we go. They both like to be on my lap at the same time. And here's the near. Okay. Got to see the kitty cats. So I should officially sign off because I get all rambly again. Right, Friday, 6 p.m. There was a lot more news that I was hoping to get to, covering a lot of queer issues in the news, which, yeah, we'll get into it on Friday. And I'm always looking to bring on more people to my show, so I'm working on it. But you might have to suffer through live streams of just me. We'll see. Salut, à la prochaine. Thank you for watching and stay tuned. I'm Sandy, wishing your tomorrow is better than your today.